Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Global Upgrade. I awakened millions of attribute points. Chapter 51. As soon as Zhou Jun showed his tyrannical aura, the three girls present were stunned. With Zhou Jun's words echoing in Mirong Shui's ears, she couldn't help biting her lower lip, her face turning blue and white. Am I being too sentimental? She looked at the young man's leaving back, and the spirit on his body was exactly the same as the figure in her memory. This made her feel even more complicated, and she stood still for a moment. Forget it, Shui, it's hard to persuade the ghost. He can't tell how much he weighs, so why should we persuade him? Wang Manting pinched her waist and sneered. Although he was startled by Zhou Jun's sudden display of aura just now, when he came back to his senses, due to his preconceived prejudice, he still felt that Zhou Jun was just pretending to be mysterious. When Mirong Shui heard this, her clenched palms hidden in her sleeves relaxed a little, and she didn't know what she was thinking on her face. After a moment, he sighed and finally returned to his previous indifferent expression. At this time, Wang Manting turned her head and glanced at Zhou Jun's figure approaching the gate, and suddenly a funny look appeared at the corner of her mouth. I remember that if you want to be qualified to enter the game reserve, you have to pass the talent test, right? You are not a D-level talent this week. If you are so aggressive now, won't you still be rejected by others later? There was amusement in her eyes, as if she were watching a joke. When Leng Xiaoxiao heard this, although she did not show any gloating, she raised her beautiful eyes to look at Zhou Jun. She didn't believe there were fools in this world, and the aura shown by Zhou Jun just now was absolutely extraordinary. But the more this happened, the more curious she became. What is Zhou Jun's confidence? Blinking her beautiful eyes, Leng Xiaoxiao stared at Zhou Jun's back. At this time, Zhou Jun had already arrived in front of the iron gate. Wang Manting, who was waiting to watch the show, could hardly stop the smile on her face. I just like watching this kind of drama where you pretend to be fat and then be exposed. Her tone was extremely mocking, as if a noble from a noble family were teasing common people. Mirong Shui said nothing, but her delicate face was full of disappointment. Obviously he also felt that Zhou Jun was about to be kicked out. But that's okay, the 10th game reserve is extremely dangerous, and it's better to lose face now than lose your life if you go in. And under the different gazes of these three women, Zhou Jun, who walked to the iron gate with his hands behind his back, was stopped by a non-commissioned officer wearing a captain's uniform with a strong breath. Stop, military power. The captain was in his early 40s and had a capable figure. After meeting Mr. Zhou, he did not show any contempt because of his dress or age. He just spoke in a business-like manner. What conditions need to be met for me to enter the 10th game reserve? Zhou Jun asked in a neither humble nor arrogant tone. He stated his purpose directly without any mincing words. When the captain heard this, his face didn't show much emotion. He just explained patiently. Since you know the 10th game reserve, you must also know the dangers there. If you want to enter it, you must first prove that you have the strength. To put it bluntly, it's about looking at your talent. Okay, Zhou Jun nodded with a calm expression. Real gold is not afraid of fire, as long as there is a way to enter. Seeing Zhou Jun so calm, the captain looked a little surprised. After a moment, he took out a tablet from his space backpack. The so-called process of proving strength is actually not as complicated as Zhou Jun imagined. It is just to detect the personal information of citizens. As long as all aspects are up to standard, there will be no problem. As Zhou Jun pressed his thumb on the tablet and read his fingerprints, his personal information page appeared in front of the captain. But what everyone didn't expect was that the captain's pupils shrank instantly after just one glance, and there was an unconcealable look of shock on his expression. But I saw that person's information page clearly written. Name: Zhou Jun. Age not available. Place of birth not available. Talent unable to check. Past experience unavailable. Remarks: insufficient access rights. This citizen's information has been encrypted to Qinglong level. Except for one name, all the personal information on the short page is invisible. The eye-catching note at the back made the captain's hands and feet instantly feel cold. Qinglong level encryption. Who is this young man in front of me? The captain looked Zhou Jun up and down, his heart already filled with huge waves. At his level, although he is still far away from the top of the Federation, he can still have vague access to some things that ordinary people don't understand. Because of this, he clearly understood the meaning of jinling level encryption. This is a federal protection policy for some special people. In other words, the seemingly ordinary young man in front of him is actually an important figure who has long been in the eyes of the top federal officials. As for him, a mere captain, he was far away from being able to view jinling level files, and his authority was far different. Thinking of this, the captain looked at Zhou Jun with a bit more respect. Suddenly he raised his hand and saluted, saying, "Mr. Zhou, I'm sorry. You are certainly qualified to enter this hunting area." His voice was loud and resounded all around. Even the many girls paying attention to the movement not far away could clearly hear it. Then, Wang Manting, who originally planned to watch the joke, changed her face completely. She looked at this scene in extreme astonishment, her face turning blue and white. It seems that he cannot understand why Mr. Zhou is qualified to enter the game reserve, and why he can let the captain in front of him treat him so politely. You know, when the three of them verified their qualifications just now, the captain was just businesslike with a cold expression. However, Zhou Jun, whom she had just devalued as worthless, received such noble treatment. Doesn't this mean that she, the second young lady of the Wang family, is no more an outcast than Zhou Jun in the eyes of the captain? Wang Manting, who was arrogant since she was a child, could not accept this. She was about to explode with anger as she stood there. And Lang Xiaoxiao, who was always quiet, had a bit of brilliance flowing in her charming eyes. This guy is definitely not an ordinary person. As the legitimate daughter of a business family, Lang Xiaoxiao is obviously more than a little more mature than Wang Manting. She also learned a lot about her ability to recognize people from her father. I became more and more convinced in my heart that Mr. Zhou was not as simple as he seemed. As for Marong Shui, one of the three girls, she was even more stunned on the spot at this moment, with a look of astonishment on her cold and proud face. How come? She also didn't understand or figure it out. In her eyes, Zhou Jun's support was just the deacon of Filong Tower. But no matter how powerful Filong Tower is, it cannot interfere with the affairs of the hunting reserve. Why would that officer respect Zhou Jun so much? Shui, is this kid really AD level talent? You won't have wrong information, right? Wang Manting gritted her silver teeth and asked Marong Shui. Marong Shui was a little unsure for a moment. After all, she only heard about it from Zhou Tong's mouth. But although Zhou Tongren is cynical, there is no need to joke about this kind of thing. Moreover, Marong Shui also vaguely inquired afterward. When Zhou Jun registered in the 5th middle school, he was indeed only AD level talent. Thousands of pairs of eyes looked at him, and there was no doubt that it was fake. Perhaps he has another chance and has some incredible skills. At this moment, Lang Xiaoxiao's voice suddenly sounded. The remaining two women were startled, and then they all felt that it made sense. Although talent accounts for the largest proportion of a person's strength, mastering an extremely powerful skill can also add a lot of points. Especially in the novice period, when everyone has not grown up and has fewer offensive methods, powerful skills will give greater advantage. HMPH. What kind of great trump card do I think I am? If I really rely on my skills to get into the game reserve, then that's not much of a skill. Wang Manting sneered again, as if trying to regain her face. As a noblewoman from a wealthy family, she considers her skills to be as good as those of her peers. Marong Shui also frowned deeply after listening to her best friend's words. Is that so? She was a little unsure if that was the case. But no matter what, the Zhou Jun in front of him did pass the strength test. At the same time, before the steel gate, seeing how smoothly Zhou Jun verified his qualifications, he didn't think too much and asked instead, "Can I go in now?" Of course, but our game reserve requires a minimum of 5 people to open it, and there is still one person missing. The captain replied respectfully, but what he said surprised Zhou Jun. "Bumpkin, why else do you think we are standing at the door?" Wang Manting, who was not far away, heard these words and immediately let out a laugh. She looked at Zhou Jun with a sense of superiority due to the information gap. But in fact, they only knew it not long before Zhou Jun. Wang Manting said this because she didn't like Zhou Jun and wanted to step on him deliberately. On this side, Zhou Jun ignored Wang Manting, but his brows furrowed involuntarily. Unexpectedly, there is a limit on the number of people who can open the gate of the hunting reserve at one time. It seems that Lu Badu's information is not comprehensive enough. When the captain in front of him saw this scene again, he immediately understood that the young man in front of him whose information was encrypted by the Qinglong level did not know the rules of the game reserve. After thinking about it, I decided to stand up and explain. Mr. Zhou, the hunting reserve is very dangerous, and because you are in the real world, you are not immune to death like you are in the secret realm, so the Federation has restricted the number of people who can enter, and only a group of at least 5 people can enter. The Federation's original intention is that if there is any danger, the same team can assist each other in offense and defense to minimize casualties. The captain didn't dare to hide it, as it was clearly stated above. But after he finished speaking, he glanced at Zhou Jun's deeply frowning brows and couldn't help but take a step forward and whispered. Actually, this is just an explicit rule. If Mr. Zhou has the ability to absolutely sweep through the game reserve and is used to walking alone, he can leave the team after entering. As a captain of the Federation, these words should not be said. But he saw that Zhou Jun had a Qinglong level encrypted file and was so young. Judging from past experience, the other party was most likely to have an SSS level talent, so he gave this reminder. After Zhou Jun heard this, he showed a look of understanding. It seems that the federal rules are not always rigid. Because the hunting reserve is dangerous, and most of the geniuses who come here to practice are S level, they need to form a forced team of 5 people. But in addition, there are other rules secretly, that is, if the person who comes to practice is SSS level and extremely strong, then after entering, he will directly leave the team and go solo, and the Federation will turn a blind eye and treat it as if it did not see it. In addition, the team formation on Blue Star is very different in reality and in the dungeon. Forming a team in a dungeon is a real invitation sent through the system and completed in a contract-like form. As a result, the experience points gained from hunting monsters will be divided equally according to the distribution agreement when forming a team. But in reality, there is no system option for teaming up. In other words, the so-called teaming up after they entered the game reserve was just a verbal agreement. So if you want to leave the team, just leave without worrying about anything. In front of the hunting reserve, Zhou Jun thought about it all and said no more. Quietly waiting for the last person to arrive so that the 5-person team can be assembled. On the other side, Wang Manting, who looked displeased with Mr. Zhou, folded her arms and snorted in a strange way. I really didn't expect that the last person in the wild platoon would be a gangster. Fortunately, I made an appointment with Zhao Tai in advance. Otherwise, I'm afraid the 3 of us girls wouldn't be able to get far in this game reserve alone. Obviously, Wang Manting regarded Zhou Jun as a cheating teammate she was randomly matched with while playing games, and said without mercy. Zhou Jun didn't even look at her, and didn't bother to argue with all this. The atmosphere at the scene was a little heavy for a while. Manting, please stop saying a few words. We are all teammates, why should we be so stiff? In the end, Lang Xiaoxiao, who had always treated Zhou Jun with courtesy, stood up. First, he criticized Wang Manting, and then explained to Zhou Jun apologetically, Mr. Zhou, don't worry, it's just a little girl who is showing off her temper. I have to say that Lang Xiaoxiao is really good at being a good person. But as soon as she said these words, Wang Manting was unhappy. As her best friend, Lang Xiaoxiao repeatedly turned her elbows outward, which made Wang Manting very unhappy. She looked the other person up and down and suddenly said, Sister Xiaoxiao, are you attracted to this guy? Have you been speaking for him? As soon as these words came out, Lang Xiaoxiao and Marong Shui were stunned. Hey, do you want a beating? Immediately, Lang Xiaoxiao was seen raising her little fist, looking angry. After Marong Shui heard Wang Manting's words, she suddenly felt uncomfortable for some reason. Sorry, I'm late. Just as the atmosphere at the scene became increasingly weird, a voice suddenly came from below the hillside. Everyone looked back and saw a well-dressed young man walking up. He has an extraordinary aura, and always has a slight smile on his lips. His appearance gives people an easy-going feeling, but if you look carefully, you will find that there is a bit of sternness flashing between his eyebrows from time to time, which makes people understand that he is anything but superficial. As simple as above. Zhao Tai, if you don't come, Sister Xiaoxiao will be snatched away. Wang Manting seemed to be very familiar with this young man. As soon as she saw him appear, she stood aside as if complaining, and said with a bit of yin and yang in her voice. A pair of eyes moved intentionally on Zhou Jun. It feels a bit like diverting misfortune to the east. Manting, you girl always talk nonsense. Lang Xiaoxiao glared at Wang Manting with an angry expression. When Murong Shui heard these words again, she pursed her lips and lowered her head to wonder what she was thinking. After hearing Wang Manting's words, the young man walking towards him naturally turned his attention to Zhou Jun. He was a little surprised at first, as if he didn't expect that a second man would appear next to the three women today. Then, a trace of imperceptible annoyance flashed in his eyes. As the eldest son of the Zhao group, he is a famous S-class genius and the heir to a billion-dollar consortium. In Linyuan City's second-generation circle, who doesn't know that he has been pursuing Lang Xiaoxiao? Although Lang Xiaoxiao never responded to him, this did not prevent him from considering the other party as his forbidden love in his heart. This time, he entrusted his hair girl Wang Manting, and after a lot of effort, he finally got the opportunity to team up with Lang Xiaoxiao to go to the game reserve. I thought that with this trip, I could show off my skills in the game reserve and win the hearts of beauties. Unexpectedly, as soon as I came here, I heard such news from Wang Manting. Not to mention whether Zhou Jun and Lang Xiaoxiao were related, but the mere presence of a second man here made him very unhappy. Manting, what on earth is going on? All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind rapidly, but nothing could be seen on Zhao Tai's face. He still pretended to be very calm and easygoing. He first smiled at the girls, and then quietly asked his sweetheart Wang Manting. You need to work in groups of 5 to enter the game reserve. This boy's name is Zhou Jun. He belongs to the Zhou family. Wang Manting did not hide anything, and quickly told the story in a low voice, and then focused on Zhou Jun's origin and Lang Xiaoxiao's unique attitude towards him just now. Of course, there are inevitably some personal biases mixed into the words. After Zhao Tai heard this, his expression suddenly became relaxed. When he looked at Zhou Jun again, there was a bit of contempt in his eyes. He originally thought that this boy who suddenly appeared would make Lang Xiaoxiao look at him with admiration. He would be some big shot with a good background. Unexpectedly, he turned out to be an outcast from the family. He has only awakened the D-level talent. Such a person is not even worthy of carrying Mr. Zhao's shoes. So Zhao Tai felt a lot more relaxed all of a sudden. In his opinion, there was no way he could be compared to such a small character. If Zhou Wang from the Zhou family came to be my love rival, I might still be a little stressed, but you, Mr. Zhou, haha, at most you can be a stepping stone for me. Zhao Tai thought secretly in his heart. When he looked at Zhou Jun, there was only deep disdain in his eyes. Since ancient times, beauties have loved heroes. He is just a trash with a D-level talent. So what if we form a team together? When you enter the hunting reserve and see those Lord-level bosses, you might be scared to wet your pants. In comparison, Zhao Tai only needs to show his strength slightly, which is in sharp contrast to Zhou Jun. Isn't it easy to win over Lang Xiaoxiao by then? As Zhao Tai rolled his eyes, he actually thought of a countermeasure. Deng Ji took the initiative to stand up and said to Zhou Jun, friend, meeting is fate. Since Xiaoxiao doesn't dislike you, then I will respect Xiaoxiao's opinion. But when we enter the game reserve, don't hold back too much, otherwise I'm afraid I won't be able to take care of you. He said it calmly and generously, and seemed to have the demeanor of a child from a noble family. But in fact, there is a hidden sword in every word, in order to step down Zhou Jun and invisibly improve his own status. Zhou Jun was standing with his hands behind his back and ignored Zhao Tai. Because from Zhao Tai's hostility toward him when he first appeared, to his sudden relaxation and contempt when he learned about his talent background, and to the conversation with a hidden knife in his words just now, he saw it all clearly. As a man of 3 generations, how could he not know what Zhao Tai was planning? It's really a boring way to improve one's status in a girl's heart by pulling and stepping on her. Zhou Jun was too lazy to pay attention to all this, he just wanted to quickly enter the hunting area and upgrade. At this time, when Zhao Tai saw that Zhou Jun didn't like him at all, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but become a little gloomy. Okay, you're pretty good at pretending. Let me see if you can still pretend after you meet those bosses in the hunting reserve. Zhao Tai thought unhappily in his heart, but still had a forced and elegant smile on his face. Since this brother doesn't like to talk, let's stop talking. I'll go and handle the procedures for everyone to enter the game reserve. He took the initiative to stand up and spoke to the three women. In his words, he already regarded himself as the captain of the team. After speaking, he walked towards the captain. When he stood in front of the captain and spoke, he looked even more at ease, fully displaying his demeanor as a disciple of his aristocratic family. It's a pity that no one of the three women behind him looked at him except Wang Manting. Lang Xiaoxiao quietly leaned towards Zhou Jun and whispered, "I'm sorry, I wanted to ease the relationship between you and Man Ting, but I didn't expect to encounter such a thing." When he spoke, his eyes were full of apology. She has followed her father in various business situations since she was a child, and Zhao Tai's little tricks can't be hidden from her at all. In my heart, I was also very unhappy with Zhao Tai, who always liked to play tricks. It doesn't matter. Zhou Jun shook his head when he saw this and didn't take Zhao Tai to heart at all. In his eyes, a second-generation playboy like this who only knows how to eat, drink, have fun and chase women is not worthy of the word Tianzhao at all. Even being his opponent is an insult to him. As for this kind of thing, Zhou Jun is naturally too lazy to pay attention to it. Not long after, Zhao Tai came back proudly with the completed procedures. Haha, this officer is quite interesting. He was cold-faced towards me at first, but when he heard that the five of us entered the game reserve together, his attitude immediately became enthusiastic. I guess they discovered my identity when checking the information. A proud smile appeared on Zhao Tai's face, and he straightened his back as he spoke, as if he was very proud. His eyes swept over Zhou Jun intentionally or unintentionally, as if to show his authority. HMPH, he's just a captain. Of those of us here, whose family background can't kill him. When Wang Manting heard Zhao Tai's story, she also chuckled, fully displaying the arrogance of a child from an aristocratic family. Marong Shui said nothing, but looking at her expression, she seemed to agree with this and took it for granted. Among everyone present, only Lang Xiaoxiao frowned. She looked at Zhao Tai, who was talking eloquently. Not only was she not impressed by the heroic display of the other party, but she felt a little disgusted in her heart. You are really overestimating your capabilities. A captain-level officer is backed by a federal military camp. His achievements today are all due to his swordsmanship on the battlefield. And he can be sent to guard the game reserve. Obviously, he must have a good reputation in the military camp. With such a network of connections, how can I be afraid of you, a playboy from an aristocratic family? I'm afraid it was someone else who really changed his attitude. Lang Xiaoxiao was thinking quietly in her heart, but a pair of beautiful eyes quietly fell on Zhou Jun. In his mind, he couldn't help but recall the military salute that the captain had given Zhou Jun when he had just verified his qualifications. Obviously, the captain's sudden change of attitude was most likely because of Zhou Jun's mysterious identity. This made Lang Xiaoxiao, who had seen through everything, even more curious. What happened to the young master who was suppressed by Zhou Wang and had to leave the family to make a living on his own in these years? I thought he was just an ordinary poor young man, but when I saw him today, I found that he was extraordinary in every aspect. Lang Xiaoxiao pondered, becoming more and more interested in Zhou Jun. Zhou Jun, on the other hand, dealt with it calmly from beginning to end. All the eyes around him would not cause him any mood swings. Lang Xiaoxiao's curiosity and Zhao Tai's suppression in secret were not worth mentioning in his eyes. This is a mentality gap. It's like a giant beast from the deep sea that has come to shallow water. How can it care about what the fish and shrimp around it think? People like Zhao Tai and Wang Manting are too low level. If a true genius like Yan Lai and Haoshan in his youth were here, Zhou Jun might treat him seriously. But Zhao Tai, he doesn't deserve it. A second-generation playboy who can only use some clumsy means but is still complacent is not worthy of Mr. Zhou's attention at all. Of course, Zhao Tai didn't know all this. Seeing Zhou Jun's silent expression, he thought he was hit by his own authority, and he couldn't help but feel a little more complacent. With this guy as a stepping stone for me and highlighting my differences, won't it be easy to win over Lang Xiaoxiao? Zhao Tai smiled secretly, feeling that he was very smart. As everyone knows, Lang Xiaoxiao's EQ and IQ are several levels higher than his. A pair of cold-eyed beautiful eyes clearly saw the clumsy pulling and stepping methods, and he had already labeled it as a negative in his heart. Rumble. Just when everyone was thinking differently, the huge iron gates in front of them slowly opened to both sides, and the entrance to the 10th game reserve was finally revealed in front of them. 3 beauties, please follow me closely after entering. The Lord-level boss is no joke. Zhao Tai took the lead and stood in front of everyone, completely treating himself as the captain of the team. He even smiled like a gentleman and said to Leng Xiaoxiao and other girls. Then, he looked at Zhou Jun faintly, and did not forget to add. Brother Zhou, my ability is limited and I can only protect girls first. Don't blame me. Although his words were high-sounding and sounded harmless at first glance, in reality they were another setback. In a subtle way, he belittled Zhou Jun as useless and elevated his own image, as if he was very powerful. However, facing Zhao Tai's hypocritical words, Zhou Jun still didn't even look at them. He put one hand in his bag and walked towards the gate of the hunting reserve. This scene obviously made Zhao Tai lose his composure again, and his eyes looking at Zhou Jun became a little colder. You ignored me over and over again. Why are you such a loser and a loser? When we enter the game reserve later, let's see how I kill you. He suppressed his anger, but put on a graceful smile again on his face, and led Wang Manting and other girls to catch up with Zhou Jun and step into the game reserve together. And as the gate of the game reserve slowly closed, a dense mountainous area like a virgin forest also appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The 10th game reserve is very large, and it is not filled with monsters as soon as you enter. Even at this glance, I didn't see even a shadow of any living thing. Everyone was confused, including Leng Xiaoxiao. At this time, Zhao Tai stood up again and talked eloquently. Haha, although there are many Lord-level bosses in this hunting reserve, their distribution is irregular. Some places have more bosses, and some places have less. However, we are only on the outer edge now, and there are no monsters. After Wang Manting heard this, she immediately frowned. That depends too much on luck, right? The hunting reserve is so big, if we don't meet a few bosses all day long, wouldn't it be a waste of time? As soon as she said these words, Leng Xiaoxiao, Mirong Shui, and even Zhou Jun all felt their hearts sink. They came all the way here just for the gimmick of the Lord Boss in the hunting reserve. After coming in, I was told that the distribution of Lord Boss was irregular. How many can be hunted depends on luck. This news made even Zhou Jun, who was as calm as Zhou Jun, unable to sit still. Plans are worse than changes. That's all, since everyone has come in, let's try our luck. Zhou Jun thought to himself, and planned to leave the team and hunt for the boss alone. But at this moment, Zhao Tai suddenly said again. Haha, beauties, don't worry. Since I know that the monsters in this hunting reserve are irregularly distributed, how can I not be prepared? Even though the game reserve project is a top secret arranged by the Federation, the energy of my Zhao family is not trivial. Before I came, my father had already given me the coordinates of where the high-level Lord's boss gathered. He looked arrogant and spoke with extreme pride, trying his best to show off his uniqueness in an attempt to gain the admiration and attention of the girls. As soon as this statement came out, everyone was indeed surprised. Wang Manting even cheered up with a smile. Okay, Zhao Tai, we even got the distribution map of monsters in the hunting reserve. Zhou Jun, who was originally planning to leave, said softly, hey, and took back his steps. He didn't expect that Zhao Tai, a dandy with nothing to lose, would actually do something good. This planning map of monsters in the hunting reserve is really an unexpected surprise. The 10th game reserve. In a dense mountain forest. Zhou Jun and his party of 5 were walking on the path. It had been an hour since they entered the game reserve. During this hour, I really didn't see a boss, but I found 2 hares. Wang Manting seemed to be on an outing. She was very excited after seeing the hare. She used a low-level magic skill to kill it instantly, which was euphemistically called practicing hands. She behaves like a rich lady going to the countryside for fun, without any sense of urgency at all. This made Zhou Jun secretly shake his head. He is just a little kid who doesn't know the world. He grew up in a wealthy environment and developed an arrogant character. He seems to be a great person, but in fact he is a complete waste with high ambitions and low abilities. If she were thrown into this hunting reserve alone, she might not survive even 3 days. With your kind of mind, giving you SS level talents is useless. Zhou Jun thought indifferently. In his previous life, he climbed to level 54 on thin ice. Although it was not a very high level, it made him understand a truth deeply. That is the standard for judging a strong person. Talent actually only accounts for half of it. More, it still depends on personal means, character and courage. Not to mention the distance, it can be seen from the past experiences of the God Kings in the starry sky. Which one of them didn't fight their way out of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood? And among them, there are many God Kings who are not SSS level talents. For example, the Shadow God King, her talent is the same as Wei Duer's, only S level. But now, he is guarding a star field for the human race and is respected by countless humans. In the era when she rose to prominence, there were many SSS level geniuses among her peers. But in terms of character and means, they are ultimately inferior. As a result, the winner who finally walked into the starry sky and smiled proudly on the world was her S-class Shadow. All these examples illustrate that a person's talent may not be good, but his character must be up to par. Wang Manting in front of me is a perfect negative teaching material. Her talent is even better than that of Wei Duer, but their performance is completely different between heaven and earth. Zhou Jun is very sure that after level 100, the achievements between the two of them will be as great as clouds and mud. Unless there is guidance from an expert to help Wang Manting wake up and change her personality earlier, there is still a chance of salvation. Of course, it is impossible for Zhou Jun to be this master. Not to mention that the two of them are not related. Even if he points out Wang Manting's shortcomings enthusiastically, the other party will not listen and will probably criticize him. So it is good to choose to respect the fate of others and let her continue to be ignorant and arrogant, and eventually slowly fall behind everyone. Zhou Jun thought this in his heart, and he slowly followed behind, like an invisible man, watching the people in front of him having fun. Zhao Tai took the lead and opened the way, talking non-stop. No matter what he encountered, he could comment on it. It seems that only in this way can he show his erudition and talent. However, except for Wang Manting who would smile and cheer, and Marong Shui who occasionally looked sideways and listened, Lang Xiaoxiao paid no attention at all, looking completely distracted. This made Zhou Jun feel a little funny, like a bystander watching a unique comedy. Everyone continued to move forward like this for more than half an hour. Finally, we encountered our first monster, a LV-15 Lord-level boss. The moment he saw the boss, Zhao Tai's face was filled with joy. Everyone, it seems that we have left the outer area. From now on, we will encounter more and more Lord-level bosses. And the coordinates my father gave me are home to a large number of high-level BOSSs, the lowest of which are LV-25. We are not far from there. With a smile on his face, he took out a blue ice pick in his hand and threw it at the Lord boss. With a loud bang, the monster's blood volume was instantly reduced by a quarter, and its huge body was also affected by an abnormal freezing effect, freezing in place. When Zhao Tai saw that his attack was effective, his face immediately became a little more proud, and he said proudly, "Don't worry, beauties, this monster will never harm you at all. I can kill it alone." As Zhao Tai spoke, he launched another series of attacks. It took about half a minute to kill this LV-15 Lord-level boss. Sister Xiaoxiao, did you see that if you want a boyfriend, look for someone like Zhao Tai? The LV-15 boss will kill you when asked, unlike some people who only hinder the team and act like fool. At this time, Wang Manting crossed her arms and pushed up her hair. They all grew up in the same circle, and she obviously supported Zhao Tai's pursuit of Lang Xiaoxiao. Moreover, when he was a wingman, he did not forget to step on Zhou Jun. After all, there are only two boys in the team, and if you want to highlight the difference between the strong ones, you need to compare them with the weak ones. After Lang Xiaoxiao heard this, her beautiful eyebrows furrowed. She didn't like Wang Manting's matchmaking between herself and Zhao Tai, but objectively speaking, Zhao Tai's performance in killing this boss alone was indeed remarkable, so she couldn't say anything for a while. Haha, I was just lucky for a moment. In terms of strength, Brother Zhou may be much higher than me. Man Ting, you'd better not talk nonsense. Zhao Tai was very helpful to Wang Manting's timely assist. At this moment, he looked at Zhou Jun with a strange expression. Come on. With his D-level talent and one skill, whether he can break through the defense of a Lord-level boss is a question. Wang Manting also glanced at Zhou Jun, sarcastically. Zhou Jun, who witnessed all this, had indifferent eyes and full of disdain in his heart. For monsters of this level, he can kill them in a real sense with one blow. This Zhao Tai used a bunch of skills and took half a minute to kill him. I really don't know where he came from to show off his confidence. Zhao Tai, are you finished? Zhou Jun is also my friend now. Are you dissatisfied with him or me? If you are dissatisfied with me, I can take Zhou Jun out of the team and form a separate team. Just when Zhou Jun was about to open his mouth to say something, Leng Xiaoxiao burst out first. She was originally the kind of cold and charming lady-type beauty. When she got angry, her aura was so strong that Wang Manting didn't dare to say a word. Zhao Tai was also startled for a moment, and then his face turned blue and white, and he didn't know whether he was embarrassed or angry. After several changes, he finally managed a smile and apologized. Xiaoxiao, don't be angry. I don't mean that to little brother Zhou. Let's keep walking. When we get to the coordinates my father gave us, we will definitely be able to upgrade you to several levels. Yes, Xiaoxiao, we are all friends. Don't you know what Zhao Tai's character is? Mirong Shui also stood up to smooth things over at this moment. At the same time, I felt a little uncomfortable. Although she also felt that Zhou Jun, who only had D-level talent, was indeed unable to compare with a proud man like Zhao Tai. But for some reason, when Leng Xiaoxiao exploded over this matter, she felt inexplicably uncomfortable in her heart. After this small episode, everyone began to move forward in silence. It's just that Zhao Tai no longer talks as talkatively as before. The face of the person walking at the front was always filled with gloom. Obviously, he was very concerned about Leng Xiaoxiao's defense of Zhou Jun, and was even annoyed. Leng Xiaoxiao, this fool, is so blind. I have been pursuing you for so long without agreeing, and now I dare to defend a country bumpkin. When you get to the core area where monsters gather and everyone hunts monsters together, but that kid can't exert any strength at all, you will know how useless he is. Zhao Tai gritted his teeth and thought viciously in his heart. The steps leading the way could not help but become faster. He couldn't wait to see Zhou Jun make a fool of himself. Everyone walked along quickly, and after half an hour, the trees around them gradually became sparse, and the road suddenly became clearer. A huge flat grassland appeared in front of us, and at a glance, there were all kinds of Lord-level bosses living on it. This made everyone's eyes look a little fiery. Finally found the core area where monsters gather. Zhao Tai breathed a sigh of relief, and then showed a kind smile again. Xiaoxiao, look, the coordinates my dad gave me are here, I didn't lie to you. As if asking for credit, he showed his authority as the eldest son of his family for the first time in a long time. Leng Xiaoxiao snorted lightly, and his face was finally no longer so frosty. Look, Xiaoxiao, Zhao Tai is definitely reliable. Ordinary people, even if they come to the game reserve, who would have such information? Wang Manting saw that Leng Xiaoxiao's anger seemed to have subsided, and she became active again. Stand up. At this moment, Zhao Tai was also very happy and proud. He laughed and led everyone towards the grassland. However, before he could completely walk out of the woods, a small stone suddenly flew over and hit him. Soon after, he saw another group of people appearing at the other end of the path. They are also boys and girls, wearing valuable equipment and with unruly expressions on their faces. Especially the person at the head is even more extraordinary. He is tall and strong, with a strong aura, and a hawk-like look on his face. At first glance, he is not a man to get along with. He just glanced at Zhao Tai, then waved his hand impatiently, like shooing away flies, and shouted extremely domineeringly. Our Jinling Yang family has taken a liking to this place. You guys, get as far away from me as you want. Jinling Yang family. Zhao Tai was surprised. In the southern border of Daxia, there are thousands of cities, large and small, but most of them were newly built after the Blue Stars area expanded 1,000 times. But Jinling is different. Before the Blue Star mutation, it was a long-established and powerful city in the Zhongnan region of Daxia, with incomparable strength. Now it ranks among the best among the thousands of cities in the southern border, and it has a vague sense of being the leader. It is a veritable super metropolis. Compared with Linyuan City, the overall strength is several times stronger. Therefore, when the opponent's leader took the lead in making a name for himself, Zhao Tai's heart skipped a beat. The Yang family. Is it the Yang family that controls Kunyu auction house? Lang Xiaoxiao also frowned at this time, and a famous Yang surnamed force in Jinling immediately appeared in his mind. Her family has been doing business for generations, especially in the three cities of Linyuan, Jinling, and Luoxu. They have business networks, so they are familiar with all the forces in Jinling. When Zhao Tai heard Lang Xiaoxiao's guess, his anxiety intensified. Obviously, he has also heard of the name of the Jinling Yang family. It was a serious family, very influential in Jinling. Hundreds of years ago, its industries spanned energy, jewelry, construction and other fields. Later, with the advent of the Sky Defender era, he gradually started a business of reselling equipment. The Kunyu auction house he founded is not only the largest in Jinling, but also very influential in half of the southern region. Although the Zhao family, where Zhao Tai belongs, is a wealthy family in Linyuan and controls a group with a market value of 1 billion, its size is dwarfed by that of the Yang family. The Yang family's Kunyu auction house has an annual turnover of tens of billions, and can earn hundreds of millions in net profit just from the sales, completely crushing the Zhao family in terms of scale. Not to mention that in addition to the rich assets of the Yang family, there are also many talents in the family, with many powerful people at level 100 sitting in charge. How could it be such a coincidence that people from the Yang family come to the game reserve? Zhao Tai knitted his eyebrows together, feeling that the problem was a bit difficult. Judging from the arrogant and domineering appearance of the other party, it is obvious that he is not an easy person to talk to. And this is indeed the case. The leader of the group in front of him was a direct descendant of the Yang family, named Yang Tianu, and he was the third eldest child in the family. Yang Tianu is different from the second-generation dude who only knows how to eat, drink and have fun. He spends most of the year away from school, but training in dungeons. His practical experience and courage are far beyond those of his peers. Moreover, his awakened S-level talent, rush hair and drink blood, is also a rare growth-type combat talent. After hunting monsters, you can devour their flesh and blood to continuously strengthen your physical and mental attributes. It is precisely because of this that Yang Tianu's aura is extremely amazing. He seems to stand out among the crowd, and his every move is full of domineering feeling. At this time, there was a trace of impatience in his eyes, and he shouted at Zhao Tai, "I told you to get out, can't you hear me?" His voice was loud, and his tone was like scolding a wild dog on the roadside, casual and contemptuous, which made Zhao Tai's face turn blue and white, which was very ugly. Frankly speaking, if Zhao Tai were here and met someone from the Yang family, he might indeed give in and give way in despair. But now there are three beautiful girls behind Zhao Tai, as well as his sweetheart Lang Xiaoxiao. If Yang Tianu is really scared away, wouldn't it be a shame to be thrown into his grandma's house? His face was gloomy, he thought for a while and said, "Brother, I am Zhao Tai from the Zhao group in Linyuan City. We are all from a wealthy family in the southern territory. There is no need for such a quarrel, right? In such a large area, there are many lords and bosses. It is more than enough for our two teams to hunt together." While speaking, Zhao Tai put his hands behind his back and tried his best to show an aura that was no weaker than that of Yang Tianu. In his words, he even moved out of the Zhao family behind him, trying to put pressure on the other party. However, after hearing this, Yang Tianu smiled disdainfully, with contempt in his eyes. The Zhao family in Linyuan City. A small group with a mere family fortune of less than 1 billion, is it worthy of calling itself a wealthy family? You can really put yourself in a good position. Let me tell you, let alone you Zhao Tai, even if your father comes here, I can't give you the face you have today. Yang Tianu's voice was like thunder and his words were extremely serious. In his words, he belittled Zhao Tai's family as worthless. He was so arrogant that even Zhao Tai's father also scolded him. The boys and girls from Jinling City who were with him burst out laughing after hearing this, and looked at Zhao Tai with amusement in their eyes. "Boy, didn't you hear what Brother Yang said? Get out of here." One of them, a tall and thin man with tattoos on his arms, wearing a plaid shirt, and carrying a thick giant sword on his shoulder, even used his little finger to pick his ears and cheered. This scene made Zhao Tai's face look uncertain. He thought that after he moved out of Zhao's house, he would at least be able to get the other party to take him seriously, but to his surprise, Yang Tianu ignored him. Even one of his younger brothers has no fear of the Zhao family. Hey, are you too presumptuous? A voice sounded across Zhao Tai, but it was Wang Manting who stood up with a frown. She is a noble daughter of the Wang family. When she travels, she is cheered and cheered by countless people. When has she ever experienced this kind of injustice? Dang Ji pinched his waist and said arrogantly, the monsters in this hunting reserve are ownerless things. Why should we give in at your word? Who are you? Yang Tianu looked at the delicate-faced girl in front of him with interest. My name is Wang Manting, from the Linyuan Wang family. Wang Manting raised her chin and said very proudly. Frankly speaking, the power of the Wang family is much stronger than that of the Zhao family where Zhao Tai belongs. It can be regarded as one of the most powerful families in Linyuan City besides the Zhou family. Therefore, Wang Manting has always been proud of being born in the Wang family. Wang family. After hearing this, Yang Tianu touched his chin and asked, is your brother from Wangcheng? Not bad. Wang Manting crossed her arms and looked extremely proud. The head of the Wang family in Linyuan City has 3 children in total, 2 sons and 1 daughter. Among them, the eldest son is over 30 and has begun to take over the affairs of the family, while the younger son Wang Cheng has just entered his sophomore year and possesses SS-level talent. He is known as the Lin son of the Wang family. He is currently studying at Nantianmen College. It is said that his level was improved last year. Already reached level 80. There is no doubt that Wang Manting has always been proud of having such a talented brother, and it is also the reason why she has always looked down upon young geniuses of all kinds. This time, she thought that if the name of the Wang family was revealed, and the other party knew about the royal city, they would inevitably retreat and betray their Wang family's face. Unexpectedly, after receiving the affirmation, Yang Tianu actually smiled up to the sky with a sarcastic look on his face. Daughter of the Wang family, what are you crazy about? Don't you know that Wang Cheng was beaten by my eldest brother Yang Tianlong in the Nantianmen College competition last month until he couldn't get out of bed? The sound was like thunder, which shocked everyone. Wang Manting was even more shocked, her face was stiff, and she shouted in disbelief, what nonsense are you talking about? My second brother can't lose. At this moment, Wang Manting is no longer as superior as the noble daughter of the Wang family. She was extremely out of sorts, shouting that she couldn't believe it, but suddenly, she thought that Wang Cheng had not sent a message to her family for a month. Could it be that the second brother who he thought was invincible really lost to Yang Tianlong? As soon as she thought about it, Wang Manting lost all hope and felt that it was absurd and unreal. But how could Yang Tianu care about Wang Manting's reaction? His eyes passed over Zhao Tai and his party. He smiled coldly and said, it's really not that enemies don't get together. I told you to get out just now and you didn't get out. Don't get out now. I want to let everyone know today that my eldest brother Yang Tianlong can defeat the genius of your Linyuan city, and I, Yang Tianu, can do the same. The atmosphere at the scene was tense. The conflict between the two teams completely escalated after learning that Wang Manting was from the Wang family. Yang Tianu obviously didn't want to let Zhao Tai and others go like this. He wanted to imitate his elder brother Yang Tianlong and teach the second generation of Linyuan City in front of him a profound lesson. Brother Yang is mighty. Let these Linyuan City people see what it means to be a genius, and what kind of elegance the children of a wealthy family should have. Hee, the sister of the Wang family across from me, do you want to have a fight with me? Let the people from Linyuan City come in standing up and leave lying down. Quote. A group of jinling geniuses started making noises like crazy. They are all teenagers in their late teens, with powerful families and considerable talents. When they get together, they will inevitably become passionate. And amidst the cries of approaching people, Zhao Tai looked extremely ugly. Not to mention the large number of people on the opposite side, Yang Tianu of the Yang family is also well known and notoriously fierce. In the second generation circle of jinling, he is a being in the upper reaches. He had long thought about giving up, but there were 3 girls behind him, and Leng Xiaoxiao was also watching. If he really ran away at this time, he would never think about hanging around in Linyuan City's circle in the future, and he would be there for the rest of his life. They couldn't even lift their heads. Zhao Tai, help me teach them a lesson. Being constantly provoked by the second generation of Jinling city maid Wang Manting, who had been admired by many stars since childhood, angry and annoyed. She subconsciously regarded Zhao Tai as her backbone and asked for help. Hearing this, Zhao Tai knew that he couldn't hide today, so he had no choice but to stand up. Then Yang Tianu is an S-level talent, and I am also an S-level talent. In addition, he also has an excellent armor set and mythical level skills. If we really fight, I may not lose to him. Zhao Tai walked forward, silently comforting himself in his heart. Oh, you are somewhat bloody. When Yang Tianu saw that Zhao Tai had really stood up, Leng Ao's face was also a little more certain, and then he stretched out a finger to tickle him. Give you a chance to use your strongest skills and let me see what you Linyuan city geniuses are capable of. Yang Tianu was seen standing with his hands behind his back, his face full of pride, and he didn't look down on Zhao Tai at all. It's too much. Seeing this scene, Zhao Tai felt a surge of anger in his heart and his blood was boiling. He looked at Yang Tianu solemnly, took a sharp breath, and suddenly a ball of light emitting violent thunder and lightning condensed in his hand. This is a book of mythical skills that his father spent a lot of effort and a lot of money to get. It is a spell-based skill with extremely high single-target burst damage. At this moment, it was displayed by Zhao Tai, and the lightning flashed, which was quite extraordinary. Go! With an angry shout, the thunder and lightning ball rushed towards Yang Tianu's face at an extremely fast speed, lightning surged along the way, and the sound was shocking. Well done Zhao Tai! Wang Manting cheered. Murong Shui was also a little moved in her heart. This is the heritage of the children of the aristocratic family. Whether it is talent or training resources, they are far away from ordinary people. Even Lang Xiaoxiao couldn't help but glance at Zhao Tai. Although she was very dissatisfied with Zhao Tai, she had to say that this attack was really impressive and had the power of a genius. Zhao Tai's confidence also increased greatly at this time. The Jinling Yang family is nothing more than that. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, as if he saw himself showing off his power, defeating Yang Tianu, and gaining Lang Xiaoxiao's heart. Unfortunately, reality did not go as he wished. Facing this massive ball of lightning, the faces of the geniuses in Jinling were very calm, even with a bit of amusement. Yang Tianu even sneered again and again with disdain. That's it. His tone was extremely disappointed, and he took the giant sword on the shoulder of the man with the flowery arm next to him. When the thunder and lightning ball flew close to him, he came first and swung down the heavy sword fiercely. Kill the thunder. The strike was earth-shattering, and the sword energy surged wildly, annihilating Zhao Tai's skills directly in the air. I'm so disappointed. Your mental strength is weak and you can't support the power of this mythical skill at all. Your timing is even worse. Is this what Linyuan City's genius is capable of? As Yang Tianu spoke, his whole body turned into a strong wind, crossing the distance between the two at an extremely fast speed, and then punched out, landing heavily on Zhao Tai's stomach. The latter didn't react at all. His eyes instantly turned white, and his body flew 4 to 5 meters under the heavy blow. He lay like a dead dog at Wang Manting's feet, spitting acid water and blood from his mouth. Zhao Tai. Wang Manting was shocked. She squatted down and helped Zhao Tai up. She saw that her little boy had blood bleeding from the corner of his mouth, his hands were trembling, and he had completely lost his ability to fight. Seeing this, she didn't dare to delay, and quickly took out the secret recovery medicine from her space backpack. After drinking 2 bottles in a row, Zhao Tai finally regained consciousness. But his face was also full of fear, and he didn't even dare to look at Yang Tianu in front of him. Waste. A loser like you is worthy of raising a third sister by yourself. Yang Tianu shook his head and looked at Zhao Tai with an extremely mocking look. Then, he turned his attention to Wang Manting and others, but lost most of the interest in his eyes. He waved his hands impatiently and scolded. I don't want to hit women, so you can help this dead dog and get out of here. See you later. We, the descendants of Jinling, remember to take a detour. After he said that, all the Jinling geniuses behind him also burst into laughter. Wang Manting didn't dare to speak anymore at this moment, she was totally lost. The second brother had never beaten anyone in the Yang family, and her younger brother Zhao Tai was also killed instantly with 1 punch. His years of pride were shattered at this moment. Although she herself possesses SS-level super talent, looking at Yang Tianu's intimidating power, she can't even muster the slightest determination to stand up and resist. Mirong Shui's pretty face was also pale, and she felt a little humiliated, but there was nothing she could do about it. Even Lang Xiaoxiao bit her red lips and finally sighed. Yang Tianu had the power to instantly kill Zhao Tai with one blow, shocking the entire audience and making him unstoppable. And she only has an S-level talent, which is about the same level as Zhao Tai, so it would be meaningless to take action at this time. It seems that today, I have no choice but to admit defeat. Manting, let's go. Mirong Shui patted Wang Manting's shoulder and left together. But just when she turned around, her whole body suddenly froze. Because at this moment, in her sight, Zhou Jun, who had been at the back of the team and had been ignored, had his hands in his pockets, past the crowd, and was walking forward step by step. His steps were firm and his figure was calm, as if everything that had just happened here had nothing to do with him. What do you want to do? Mirong Shui frowned, feeling a bad feeling in her heart. Wang Manting and the pale Zhao Tai also looked at Zhou Jun in disbelief. When Lang Xiaoxiao saw this scene, she looked thoughtful, and a bold idea suddenly appeared in her mind. Could he be trying to? Thinking this in his heart, Lang Xiaoxiao's face was suddenly filled with shock. At this time, Zhou Jun had already surpassed everyone. He moved forward step by step, and his thin figure was getting closer and closer to the grassland full of lord bosses. Stop. The geniuses here in Jinling City also discovered Zhou Jun's anomaly, and they all felt a little strange. Among them, the young man with flowery arms started shouting. Boy, didn't you hear me telling you to get out? He rolled up his arms and sleeves and shouted fiercely. At the same time, as if he had just heard it, Zhou Jun finally stopped. Then he slowly turned his head, his eyes extremely cold. Are you talking to me? Zhou Jun put his hands in his pockets and stood coldly between the two waves of people. At this moment, he was full of restrained aura and looked ordinary, but his expression was calm and composed, as steady as a mountain. Her eyebrows were even more calm, and she didn't lose her composure at all because of the man with the flowery arms scolding. The flower arm was startled when he saw this, and his voice was a little surprised. Boy, are you crazy? He took 2 steps forward and looked Zhou Jun up and down with a ruthless expression. It seems that he didn't expect that when Zhao Taidu failed in one move and the Wang family girls gave in, someone would dare to stand up and confront the Jinling children. Wei Xiao, it seems that you don't have to worry about what you say. The handsome young man from Linyuan City doesn't take you seriously at all. Many Jinling disciples started booing after seeing this. One of the girls with exquisite makeup shouted with a smile, as if she was afraid that the world would not be in chaos. And Westbrook, who had tattoos on his arms, immediately felt very embarrassed after hearing the teasing from his teammates. His face darkened, and he looked at Zhou Jun with a somewhat cruel look from the corners of his eyes. Boy, I don't care what your background is. Kneel down immediately and kowtow to me 3 times. Call me master, and I will let you go today. Otherwise, I'll let you crawl out. The man with the flowery arm thrust the giant sword on his shoulder heavily into the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Above his head, a level as high as LV-24 was actively displayed, giving him a full sense of oppression. The children of these big families generally awaken much earlier than ordinary students. Most of them have reached level 3 in their 2nd year of high school or even their 1st year of high school. Compared with peers who took the college entrance examination together, they have a longer time to develop, and the grade gap is huge. In addition, although Westbrook is only Yang Tianu's younger brother, he comes from a family that ranks among the 2nd-rate in Jinling. He has strong financial resources and has already put on a complete set of excellent armor sets at a young age. Coupled with the fact that he also has A-level combat talents, the combination of multiple factors makes Westbrook's momentum quite impressive, and he is already considered to be one of the top combatants among his peers. At this moment, when he showed his power, the crowd of Jinling disciples who were watching were laughing and watching the show. They couldn't wait to see the ugly face of the Linyuan genius, in their eyes kneeling down and begging for mercy. Yang Tianu, on the other hand, sneered and shook his head, with deep disdain in his eyes. Zhao Tai's disastrous defeat made him so disappointed with the so-called geniuses of Linyuan City. In his opinion, even Zhao Tai, the leader, could only run away. How capable could this unknown person who had been standing at the back of the crowd be? It's not worth it for him to take action personally. His subordinate Westbrook is enough to teach this person a lesson. He's really crazy. On the other side, when Wang Manting saw this scene, her delicate face immediately showed a bit of anger. The people from Jinling have obviously let us go, so what else can he do? Isn't he embarrassed enough? She gritted her silver teeth. She already looked down on Zhou Jun, but now she felt more and more that the abandoned son of the Zhou family in front of her was not only incompetent but would only cause trouble. Merong Shui also clenched her fists tremblingly, wondering why Zhou Jun would take the initiative to anger the opponent at this juncture. A pair of big eyes like autumn water, full of confusion and disappointment. As for Zhao Tai, who was forced to stand by Wang Manting, he suddenly showed an expression of gloating after seeing this scene. He had long been unhappy with being ignored by Zhou Jun over and over again, but he just couldn't find a chance to straighten things out. But now, this guy is so reckless, and dares to drag him like this in front of the terrifying Jinling Yang family, acting so arrogant, he is really looking for death. You're not even your opponent, so where do you have the courage to continue to touch those monsters? Do you think you are the emperor? Zhao Tai's face was full of sarcasm. People are like this. After they fail, they look forward to seeing others end up in the same situation as him. Among everyone, only Lang Xiaoxiao remained silent at this time. Just a pair of beautiful eyes looked at Zhou Jun quietly, with an inexplicable feeling of expectation in her heart. At this moment, in the middle of the field, under the gaze of many different eyes, Zhou Jun remained expressionless, but his eyes became colder. I will also give you a chance. If you destroy your hands and feet now, I can spare your life. Zhou Jun was seen with his hands behind his back, his cold eyes not wavering at all, looking at the man with flowery arms like he was looking at an ant on the roadside. Okay, you have the guts. Westbrook was so angry that he laughed back, and a flash of dark green light suddenly bloomed from his body, covering his whole body with an intimidating green energy. Boy, I hope that when my big sword strikes you, you can still be as tough-talking as you are now, he said with a ferocious smile. This is the talent effect of Westbrook's awakening. When wrapped in green light, his whole body's resistance and mobility are greatly improved, and he is immune to control effects. At this time, he was carrying the excellent heavy sword. When he ran, not only was he not affected by the weight, but his speed was getting faster and faster. The air seemed to be torn apart when he swung it, and his momentum was amazing. Westbrook has eaten a lot of sword skill books and is about to activate the proficiency system. What can this kid do to stop him? I bet that kid can't last more than 3 seconds under Westbrook's giant sword, and he will kneel down and beg for mercy. The geniuses in Linyuan City are so blind. They are so different from our Jinling. When all the Jinling disciples saw this, they felt that the outcome was already decided. They all laughed at the bet, or shook their heads in denial. It's over. Merong Shui's heart sank to the bottom when she saw that the flower-armed man didn't hold back at all. It was as if he saw Zhou Jun's downfall in the next second. Lang Xiaoxiao also clenched her fists tightly, with a look of nervousness on her beautiful face, and it was obvious that she was not at peace in her heart. Although she knew that Zhou Jun was no ordinary person, after all, it was their first meeting today, so she was not sure about Zhou Jun's true combat power. And under Lang Xiaoxiao's nervous gaze, the majestic Westbrook has already rushed in front of Zhou Jun. He showed no mercy at all, swung the giant sword in his hand and let out a roar, activated an excellent sword skill, and made up his mind to teach Zhou Jun a lesson. Boy, kneel down and call me master. With a loud shout, the powerful and heavy sword struck head-on. An ordinary person would not be killed or disabled by this blow. But Zhou Jun just glanced at him, and there was no fluctuation in his deep eyes. When the giant sword was about to fall on his head, he raised his right hand first. Then, under the astonished gaze of the flower-armed man, the white palm was like an iron pincer, coming first and grabbing the blade of the giant sword accurately and steadily. At this moment, the flower-armed man only felt as if his sword blade was cutting on fine steel, and he could not make an inch forward even if he used all his strength. His face was extremely frightened, as if he had seen a ghost. He had used all his strength to strike this sword, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that it was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, but yet it was easily caught by the other party with only one hand. How much strength does this require? He panicked, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. And in his horrified eyes, that calm and indifferent face finally looked at him for the first time. You cannot. A disdainful word was heard, accompanied by Jo Jun's lightning-fast kick. With this kick, he used 90% of his strength, so fast and hard that the flower-armed man couldn't react at all. He only felt as if he had been hit by a speeding truck, and his internal organs were shattering. The whole person was like a meteor, flying 20 to 30 meters in the blink of an eye, breaking countless trees along the way. In the end, he was paralyzed on the ground like a dead dog, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. At this moment, the whole place was dead silent. In the woods of the game reserve, the whole place was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. The expressions on the faces of the jinling disciples that were either mocking or teasing all froze. Murong Shui and Wang Manting, on the other hand, were also frozen in place as if they were struck by lightning. They were dumbfounded. Their little mouths were open for a long time, but they were speechless and couldn't say a word. Zhao Tai, who had planned to gloat and laugh at the joke, was completely stunned, as if he was demented, and finally fell to the ground. He. He pointed at Jo Jun tremblingly for a long time, but he couldn't say a complete sentence. He was as lost as a clown. Leng Xiaoxiao's eyes were bright, and her pretty face was full of excitement, like a gambler who was elated when he got something right. To be honest, everything happened too fast at the scene. In their sight, the man with the flowery arm just came into contact with Jo Jun for a moment, and his whole body flew out like a cannonball. 20 or 30 meters away. How strong is this kick? The figures were almost invisible. After a long while, a dandy boy from Jinling came to his senses and hurriedly ran towards the man with the flowery arm to check on him. The latter seemed to have lost his human form, his chest was sunken, and he didn't know how many ribs were broken. The excellent grade breastplate that originally protected the chest was shattered on the spot and became a piece of waste. This made the dude take a breath of cold air. One kick directly destroyed an excellent piece of armor. Is this really something humans can do? He had only heard that there were fierce high-level BOSSs in the dungeon that could break armor and equipment of the same level, but he had never seen anyone do this in reality. And he could see clearly that the boy from Linyuan City was only level 14. But what about Westbrook? Not only is his level as high as 24, but the excellent level breastplate he wears is also level 20 equipment. Level armor breaking, or when Westbrook turned on his talent and increased his own resistance. How did he do it? This is simply more vicious than the super boss in the dungeon. Isn't the young god king just like this? The dude swallowed his saliva, with deep horror in his eyes. At this moment, he finally understood what kind of being his group had provoked. He lowered his head and glanced at the flower-armed Westbrook, who was almost only breathing in but not breathing out. He was on the verge of death. He didn't dare to delay, and quickly carried the opponent back to Yang Tianu's side. Brother Yang, drenched in cold sweat, he placed the flower-armed man in the middle of the crowd, and all the Jinling disciples took a deep breath when they saw the latter's miserable appearance. With this kind of injury, even if the secret medicine is used to save a life in time, he will still have to lie down for 10 days and a half. Everyone stopped laughing, their hearts were extremely heavy, and there was still a hint of fear. As for Yang Tianu, his eyes were the most solemn and his face was as gloomy as water. After resting on the dead dog like Westbrook for a while, there were uncontrollable veins beating on his forehead. Obviously, for the proud man, he was very angry when his younger brother behaved like this. I never expected that there would be a true genius like you in Linyuan City. I was mistaken. Finally, Yang Tianu stretched his muscles and walked out slowly. His sharp eyes stared at Jo Jun, with both anger and high-spirited fighting spirit in his eyes. Yang Tianu can be regarded as a qualified genius. He is not greedy for pleasure like ordinary dudes, and he is also eager to compete with various geniuses to hone himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have shown such disappointment after defeating Zhao Tai with one move. Seeing Jo Jun take action at this moment, the powerful force erupted from that kick made even a proud man look at him with admiration, feeling that he had found an opponent worthy of all his efforts. May I have your name? He stood solemnly in front of Jo Jun, his blood boiling all over, and as he spoke, the power of his talent was also activated. Jun Zhou. Opposite him, Zhou Jun put his hands in his pockets and said calmly with an arrogant expression. His attitude did not change because his opponent became Yang Tianu. But this scene also made Yang Tianu angry again. He said coldly, "You are too crazy. I admit that you have some abilities, but I, Yang Tianu, am not an unparalleled genius. I started being trained by my family in the military camp special training when I was 10 years old, day and night. When I was 15 years old, I entered the dungeon for the first time and fought with my bare hands without awakening. Level 3 Demonic Tiger. At the age of 16, I defeated all invincible opponents at the same level in Jinling number 3 high school. At the age of 18, I rose to LV 30, understood the meaning of the fist, and unlocked the proficiency of the boxing system. I have 2 mythical skills and 1 epic skill. Why do you have it? Dare you look down on me?" The faster he spoke, the more confident he became. With every word he spoke, he would take a step forward, and at the same time his momentum would increase. When the last words echoed in the woods, his body was already less than 3 meters away from Zhou Jun. A strong invincible will rose into the sky, and his own state also climbed to its peak. His tiger eyes were filled with fire, and he looked sharply at Zhou Jun, trying to get a reason from him. However, in the face of all this, Zhou Jun remained unmoved and said indifferently, "Maybe in your world, your achievements have reached the sky, so you are complacent. But for me, you, daughter not qualified yet." His words were astonishing, and he criticized Yang Tianu as worthless, but his plain tone made everyone understand that there seemed to be no deliberate derogatory meaning, but that he was indeed stating the facts. This guy is so arrogant. Who is he, that even Brother Yang doesn't look down on him like this? Many people in Jinling City looked at each other with extreme shock in their eyes, mixed with the humiliation of being looked down upon. Yang Tianu was the first to bear the brunt. He was so shocked by Zhou Jun's words that his invincible aura lost a bit of weight. Then he gritted his teeth fiercely, and a strong fighting spirit emerged in his eyes again. "It's no use talking anymore, let's fight," he shouted angrily, and his blood boiled all over his body again. What was even more surprising was that the hair on his skin was also growing rapidly, and in a moment his hair was disheveled, like a savage who had returned to his ancestors. This is a characteristic produced by his awakening talent, ruxing hair and drinking blood. By devouring the flesh and blood of monsters, he continuously improves his physical and physical attributes, but it also turns him into such a wild appearance. But obviously, Yang Tianu didn't care about this. As his hair grew, his fighting spirit became stronger. Zhou Jun couldn't help but shook his head when he saw this. "I won't shed tears until I see the coffin, so take action." How similar is this understatement to Yang Tianu's previous attitude towards Zhao Tai? That is, when you face people who are many times weaker than you can be calm. This scene made Yang Tianu even more angry. The moment Zhou Jun's words fell, he took a step forward, turned his waist, concentrated all the strength of his upper body on his right fist, and threw out an earth-shattering punch. With this punch, the fist's intention boiled like the sea, and a golden dragon shadow wrapped around his entire arm, and his huge fist was where the dragon's head was. Dragons fight in the wild, epic melee skills. When it was unleashed at this moment, it was truly a stunning punch, shocking everyone in the world. Brother Yang's punch can definitely kill the level 30 Lord Boss instantly. Someone exclaimed. "Can that kid catch it?" Someone also asked. Curious eyes followed the situation on the battlefield closely. At this time, Zhou Jun finally became more serious. But only a few points. "I saw that he didn't move, he didn't dodge or dodge, and he also punched. This punch has no name, no level, no punching intention and no dragon shadow. Just a terrifying power of up to 10,200 points." Boom. The two fists collided, earth shaking, and a violent wave of air spread around the two of them, blowing the surrounding vegetation and leaves. Under the horrified gazes of many people, they saw that among the two figures who were inseparable, Zhou Jun did not move at all, while Yang Tianu took 3 steps back uncontrollably. Hiss. In an instant, countless gasps of cold air sounded. Yang Tianu, who has always been famous for his strength and physical attributes, was actually forced to retreat during the strength competition. How incredible is this? Even Yang Tianu himself looked confused at the moment, with huge waves in his heart. You must know that his S-level room hair and drink blood is a pure physical strengthening skill. By continuously devouring the flesh and blood of monsters, it strengthens the dual attributes of strength and body. It is expected that the physical body will become a saint in the future. In terms of development potential, the future achievements of this talent are absolutely immeasurable. And Yang Tianu also deeply understands his own advantages, and has always taken the melee route. And through his continuous efforts, his strength attribute has been developed to more than 6,000 points, and his constitution has reached more than 4,000 points. To be honest, at this age, he possesses such terrifying physical and mental attributes, which makes him unique even in Jinling City where Genius Ryu is a genius. But today, however, Yang Tianu lost to the unknown person named Zhou Jun in front of him in the field in which he was most proud. This made it difficult for him to accept it, almost to the point of doubting himself. After all, with that punch just now, Yang Tianu didn't mean to test it at all. He not only used all his strength, but also used epic skills. And the most unacceptable thing for Yang Tianu lies here. He could see clearly that when faced with such an earth-shattering punch from him, Zhou Jun just responded with an ordinary punch without using any skills at all. Doesn't this mean that even if he tried his best to launch an offensive, he couldn't beat an ordinary punch? How high is this guy's strength attribute? Yang Tianu's face was complicated, and he was completely shocked by Zhou Jun. Some ability, but not enough. Zhou Jun felt the opponent's offensive and commented lightly. In fact, to be honest, Yang Tianu meets the standards of a genius in all aspects. I am afraid that anyone will praise him for his abilities. It's just a pity that he met Zhou Jun, a genius who followed the same physical route as him. The redistribution of SSS level is completely the ultimate enhanced version of S-level Rumao Yin Shui. Both of them rely on increasing their own attributes to achieve the purpose of defeating all methods with one force. But once again distributing that unreasonably powerful talent effect, how can it be compared to Rumao drinking blood? Among his peers, Zhou Jun is invincible in terms of physical body. Moreover, Yang Tianu's Rumao drinking blood can only increase the two attributes of strength and body, but Zhou Jun's four-dimensional attributes increase simultaneously, so he has no shortcomings at all. With more than 40,000 total attributes in his body, every move he makes is extremely powerful and unstoppable. I'm not convinced, come again. After hearing Zhou Jun's words, Yang Tianu gritted his teeth and opened his posture again. He has an invincible Taoist heart, has his own way to go, and does not want to be wiped out by Zhou Jun. So he chose to fight again. This time, Yang Tianu became even more ferocious. He roared to the sky, the hair on his body became more and more prosperous, his human features gradually decreased, and his wild aura became extremely strong. What's even more astonishing is that his ears have become thin and long, covered with fluff. At the same time, all the nails have grown rapidly and are extremely sharp, and a pair of snow-white fangs also extend strangely from his mouth. Looking at the whole person at a glance, where are they still human? A truly humanoid beast. Brother Yang has unleashed his awakening skills. Some of the disciples of Jinling exclaimed at this time. At the moment, Yang Tianu was full of blood and fierce, and there was not much reason left in his eyes. His whole person was almost assimilated by the manic wildness. This is exactly the negative effect brought about by his talent, ruxing hair and drinking blood, after activating the awakening skill. Although the awakening skill can increase the combat power of the whole body after activating it, Yang Tianu rarely uses it actively even when he downloads dungeons because it will cause him to lose his mind. This time, he was also forced to panic. He didn't want his Taoist heart to be damaged, so he took the initiative to activate the awakening technique to fight. Roar! A cry that sounded both human and inhuman resounded through the woods, making everyone who heard it feel frightened and terrified. A genius with a level as high as LV30 and an S-level talent risked his life to fight. This scene was really shocking. Even though everyone present was the best among the younger generation, it was rare to see him. Zhao Tai in the crowd looked extremely pale. At this moment, he realized how big the gap was between him and a true genius like Yang Tianu, who were both S-class. When he killed him with one blow just now, he probably didn't even use 1/5 of his strength. But under such a comparison, he couldn't help but be horrified. How deep should Zhou Jun's strength be? Unexpectedly, with just one meeting, Yang Tianu was able to reveal his ability to suppress the situation. When he thought of this, Zhao Tai felt burning pain on his face. Previously, he had looked down on Mr. Zhou in every possible way and suppressed him openly and covertly. Now it seems that I was so ridiculous at that time, I was just a clown. No wonder that Zhou Jun never looked at him in the eyes from beginning to end. Thinking of this, Zhao Tai felt depressed and lost his mind. In the center of the field, a battle between two peerless geniuses had already broken out. After activating the awakening skill and going wild, Yang Tianu is really a tiger that goes down the mountain. He leapt across a distance of several meters and slapped Zhou Jun in the air, causing gusts of wind along the way. However, Zhou Jun just turned sideways and calmly dodged it. When Yang Tianu saw that the blow missed, he threw several punches in succession. Each punch was extremely fierce and even caused a sonic boom. But in the face of this dazzling fist shadow, Zhou Jun still stood as steady as a mountain, with his hands behind his back, and he was able to dodge this overwhelming offensive with just his eyesight. What? You missed the mark all at once. How high is his agility attribute? Is this really someone of our generation? Looking at Zhou Jun's superb body skills in the field, all the onlookers were dumbfounded. Yang Tianu also became more and more annoyed as he fought. He used all his strength with every punch, but he couldn't even touch the corner of the opponent's clothes. This feeling was too uncomfortable. You can only hide. Do you dare to fight me head on? His beard and hair were spread out, and he roared with blood-red eyes staring at him. When Zhou Jun saw this, he sighed quietly, and then with a flick of his hand, a long black sword with a cold light appeared out of thin air. Since you insist on fighting, I will satisfy you. One sword. You only need to resist my sword to survive, and you will win this battle. Zhou Jun held the knife in one hand and said shockingly. But everyone who heard it at the scene was extremely surprised, especially the group of jinling disciples, who had a look of humiliation on their faces. This person is too crazy. That's right, Brother Yang has even activated his awakening skill, and he actually said he only uses one sword. Is this too disrespectful? Even if you are a genius, you shouldn't say such big words. Quote. The disciples of Jinling gritted their teeth, feeling that Lord Zhou was too arrogant. Some even shook their heads secretly, feeling that it was impossible for Lord Zhou to win with just one strike. As the person involved, Yang Tianu was extremely angry and punched again without saying a word. The strong wind surged and the fist power surged, obviously activating another skill that could suppress the bottom of the box. When many of the Jinling disciples saw this scene, they secretly applauded, their eyes gleaming with hope. At the same time, Zhou Jun also took out his sword. He didn't use any gorgeous sword skills, he just thrust forward with a straight thrust. Although this stab seemed ordinary, it actually made ripples appear in the air, the void was faintly shaking, and there was even a shocking sword intent entangled in it. The sting of gluttony. This move is clearly a branch skill of the immortal level sword skill, Rhapsody of Conviction. At this moment, with the damage added by the sword proficiency level 55-1, it really takes over the world and is unstoppable. With the flash of swords and shadows, two figures passed each other in the blink of an eye. Zhou Jun withdrew the horizontal sword and put it back into his space backpack without even looking at Yang Tianu. Behind him, Yang Tianu's tall and strong body remained motionless. In the middle of his chest, there was a sword hole of about 3 inches, and blood was gurgling out. It was better for Zhou Jun to hold back, otherwise, the sword would have struck not to the side, but to the heart. Yang Tianu's body was stiff at this moment. He did not look down at his injuries, but turned to look at Zhou Jun. His lips trembled and he wanted to say something, but in the end he couldn't. After just giving a wry smile, the strong body fell to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. Defeat Tianu with one sword. At this moment, the entire audience was silent. Everyone in Jinling looked at this scene blankly, as if struck by lightning, in disbelief. They were still questioning angrily before, thinking that Zhou Jun was too arrogant. How could he defeat Yang Tianu, who had activated the awakening skill with just one sword? But at this moment, when the facts were before their eyes, everyone was silent, and they all felt like mourning their heirs. Who else is dissatisfied? Zhou Jun Gujing's unwavering eyes looked around everyone present. Wherever his eyes passed, no one dared to look at him. These young men and noble ladies from aristocratic families from Jinling were all like quails, huddled in place and not daring to say a word. Even the mighty Westbrook was kicked to pieces, and the invincible Yang Tianu was no match for Zhou Jun. How could they dare to come forward again? Just thinking that Mr. Zhou would not trouble them, he already thanked them profusely. Everyone get lost. Seeing this, Zhou Jun waved his hand casually, as if he was chasing away a group of annoying flies. Of course, he didn't have time to argue with these people. Even if he defeated Yang Tianu, it was not his intention, but the other party took the initiative to fight. At this moment, I just want to go into the place where monsters gather and kill everyone, and I will be happy to level up. As for the group of Jinling disciples, when they saw Lord Zhou, they didn't care about them, and they all felt as if they had been granted amnesty. Several dandy men came to Zhou Jun's feet with nods and bows, carefully picked up the seriously injured Yang Tianu, and then left quickly and dejectedly. Without looking back, they disappeared into the woods in a short time. At this point, all the disciples of Jinling were defeated. One person crushes Jinling. What a peerless grace this is. Not far away, Lang Xiaoxiao looked at this scene, her pretty face flushed. The image of Zhou Jun scolding Fang Chu with a snap of his fingers, making all the geniuses in Jinling bow their heads, is probably going to be engraved in her heart forever. No matter how many years pass, it can never be forgotten. At the same time, Mirong Shui's expression was the most complicated. She bit her red lips tightly, her innocent face showed confusion, shock, and a wry smile. Countless emotions intertwined in her heart, and eventually they all turned into regret. She was wrong, so wrong. All along, Mirong Shui had stubbornly believed that Zhou Jun had no ability and that all he relied on was external force like Deacon Shu of Filong Tower, so he could not stand on the stage. Even until just now, she felt that Zhou Jun was trying to show off his strength and was still imagining that he was the eldest young master of the Zhou family, and she felt disappointed in her heart. But in the end, reality slapped her hard. Zhou Jun, whether he is in the Zhou family or not, is always the radiant young genius. Any D-level talent or anything inferior to Zhou Wang are all fake. Being able to defeat Yang Tianu with one strike, is this something that a D-level talent can do? Even if Zhou Wang comes. Brother Jun. Infinite regret filled Mirong Shui's heart. She looked at the incomparably majestic figure in front of her, and it gradually overlapped with the always confident and bright young man in her memory. It's just, the people are still the same, but the feelings are no longer the same. From the moment Zhou Jun was kicked out of the Zhou family, but she chose to distance herself, their futures were destined to never intersect again. From then on, the mountains were mountains and the water was water. The sky was full of mist and rain falling on Jincheng. One person held an umbrella and two people walked together. With a wry smile on her lips, Mirong Shui clenched her fists. After all, she still didn't dare to step forward and say a word to Zhou Jun, who was so high-spirited at this moment. Unlike Mirong Shui, Wang Manting was equally complicated and speechless at this time. Her delicate and pretty face was burning at the moment, and she stood stiffly in place, her emotions in her heart fluctuating. The trip to the game reserve, just half a day's experience, shattered all the pride she had held for more than 10 years. From Yang Tianu's merciless crushing, to Zhou Jun, who had always despised him, he calmly took action and defeated Yang Tianu in an even more devastating way, and everyone in Jinling bowed down after being overwhelmed by his own strength. All of this happened so fast that her brain almost shut down and she felt like a joke. At this moment, he stood alone, without saying a word, and there was no trace of pride in his eyes. Not to mention Zhao Tai, who was completely stupid. He didn't even dare to look at Zhou Jun's back, and he didn't have any thoughts about Lang Xiaoxiao in his heart. He knew that from this moment on, he would never let Lang Xiaoxiao look him in the eye again. Thinking of this, Zhao Tai felt extremely bitter in his heart, and felt that the greatest irony in life was nothing more than this. And at this time, Zhou Jun, who was standing proudly, finally looked back and turned his attention to everyone. Just when she was about to say something, she saw Wang Manting speaking with red eyes and clenched fists. You don't have to say anything, I'm leaving right now. The pride she had raised for more than 10 years is gone, but Wang Manting still has her own backbone. She didn't want to use Zhou Jun's light to upgrade in the grassland, and beg for food behind the people she had despised. This was not acceptable to her. So Wang Manting chose to leave voluntarily. When Zhao Tai saw this scene, although he was a little jealous of the Lord Boss not far away, he finally gritted his teeth and followed Wang Manting's footsteps. At this point, only Lang Xiaoxiao and Murong Shui were left in the field. Murong Shui did not dare to look at Zhou Jun. She lowered her head. After hesitating for a long time, she finally sighed and chose to leave as she was too embarrassed to stay here. Lang Xiaoxiao smiled coquettishly at Zhou Jun and said, "I'll just upgrade this area on the outside, so it won't affect you, okay?" She pointed to the corner of the grassland, where there were some level 25 Lord Bosses, which was the limit of what she could do alone. Certainly. Seeing this, Zhou Jun nodded slightly. In fact, it stands to reason that the coordinates of this gathering of monsters were brought by Zhao Tai. Even if he and Wang Manting did not leave, Zhou Jun would not say anything. Besides, there are so many monsters here, and Zhou Jun is not interested in the level 25 boss on the outside at all. What he wants to hunt is the level 30 Lord Boss deep in the grassland. Therefore, in terms of resources, it is fully allocated. Shaking his head secretly in his heart, Zhou Jun no longer hesitated. His whole body turned into a strong wind, and he quickly rushed into the depths of the grassland. Chapter 61. In the 10th Game Reserve. On the endless grassland, Lord-level monsters were wandering aimlessly. Zhou Jun ignored the low-level monsters on the periphery and went straight to the depths of the grassland. There are a large number of level 30 Lord monsters scattered there, and this is also the upper limit of the level that the 10th Hunting Reserve can accommodate. In fact, objectively speaking, monsters of this level have far exceeded the capabilities of novice Sky Slayers. In the federally recognized system, only the first 20 levels are considered the novice stage. The reason is that after level 20, the strength of monsters will generally increase significantly, and even some boss-level monsters will have multiple small skills and become more dangerous. Therefore, before level 20, the monsters are not very strong. For the novice skybreakers of the human race, this is a relatively mild development period, which is called the novice period. The casualty rate is the lowest in the novice stage. As long as you are not too stupid, you can usually level up smoothly. Once you pass this novice period, you need to be cautious, as a little carelessness may lead to disaster. Generally, before level 20, few people will challenge monsters that are stronger than the novice level. Only those geniuses with super talents and the ability to kill monsters beyond levels will use this to hone themselves. Zhou Jun is this kind of person. He said nothing at this moment, holding a horizontal knife in his hand and fighting all the way into the depths of the grassland. As a genius among geniuses, even if he has surpassed himself by more than 10 levels, he can still run rampant. All the monsters that dared to show their fangs to him along the way were unable to withstand the fate of being killed with a single blow. Kill the LV-27 Lord-level boss Hexagonal Rhinoceros. Experience value plus 1765. Kill the LV-29 Lord-level boss Dark Cat. Experience value plus 1900. Kill the LV-30 Lord-level boss Vortex Bear. Experience value plus 2313. Zhou Jun fought all the way, and his swords were bleeding. As each sword fell, a corresponding kill prompt appeared in the corner of his sight, all of which were worth 4-digit experience. This made Zhou Jun feel excited and happy. Continuously killing monsters across more than a dozen levels of his own, and harvesting massive amounts of experience points from Lord-level boss, this hunting reserve is simply a paradise for him. Since his return from rebirth, he has never upgraded as happily as he did today. Especially as we get deeper and deeper into the core, almost no other levels of monsters can be seen nearby, and almost all of them are level 30 boss. This resulted in a stable gain of more than 2,000 experience points every time. Zhou Jun's level also soared like a rocket at this moment. The more he kills, the more brave he becomes, and the more he fights, the more crazily he becomes. Too powerful. This is the real genius. On the edge of the monster gathering place, Lang Xiaoxiao had just panted and killed a level 25 monster alone. Looking up, she saw the scene of Zhou Jun stabbing a level 30 Lord boss deep in the distant core. The whole person was stunned for a moment, the cold and pretty face was full of shock, and at the same time, his heart was trembling more and more. But then, there was a wry smile. Because she knew that she and Zhou Jun were from completely different worlds. Although she is also a genius with S-level talent and comes from a big family, compared with a peerless monster like Zhou Jun, she is far behind. In the future, the gap between the two is destined to become wider and wider. This made Lang Xiaoxiao, who had always been arrogant, unconsciously feel a bit inferior and disappointed. No, I don't want to just look up at your back. I must follow your footsteps. In the history of the Federation, there are no examples of people who became god kings with S-level talents. I, Lang Xiaoxiao, am not weaker than others. But after a few breaths, Lang Xiaoxiao seemed to have figured something out again. Her whole face felt like a shot of chicken blood, and her eyes were filled with unprecedented determination. She doesn't have the strength to crush everything like Zhou Jun, who can go deep into the depths where monsters gather, and can only kill monsters on the edge. But this did not affect her fighting spirit. She gritted her teeth, and in the blink of an eye, the tall and slender Imperial sister fought towards a level 25 monster again. Zhou Jun didn't know what Lang Xiaoxiao was thinking. In his eyes, the other party is just an ordinary friend. Far less important than hunting the monsters in front of you. At this moment, he was looking around and had completely penetrated into the depths where the monsters gathered. Looking around, there were level 30 lord bosses full of vitality and blood everywhere. Perhaps it was because Zhou Jun was too murderous and the smell of blood on his body was too strong. These lord bosses, who usually work in separate camps, unexpectedly formed a rare encirclement and launched an attack on Lord Zhou. But how could Lord Zhou be afraid? He looked up to the sky and smiled, turning the horizontal knife that had been stained with blood and ink in his hand, and the knife's intention soared into the sky. It's just a bunch of evil beasts, so what if they join forces? Confident voices spread in all directions. Zhou Jun stepped forward with an explosion of power with over 10,000 attribute points. Combined with the sword moves of the 7 deadly sins, which were immortal level skills, flesh and blood flew everywhere he passed. Under the intensive offensive, although occasionally some monster skills would hit Zhou Jun. But for his equally good physique, coupled with the resistance provided by the epic armor set, it is not painful at all. Coupled with the recovery effect of Ring of Endless Life, the more you fight, the braver you become, like a perpetual motion machine. Kill the LV30 Lord level boss Thunder Snow Monkey. Experience value plus 2210. Congratulations, you have successfully reached level 15. After killing a Lord boss again, Zhou Jun's body flashed with brilliance and he was upgraded. The state of his body reached its peak in an instant, and the upper limit of attribute points was also expanded. Upon seeing this, Zhou Jun immediately filled up all 4-dimensional attributes without saying a word. A few seconds later, his various attributes had reached 11,700, and his strength increased again. But when he glanced at his experience bar, his eager heart couldn't help but cool down a bit. The experience value for reaching level 15 has been doubled again. If it weren't for the large number of Lord-level bosses he wanted to kill in this hunting reserve, he really didn't know that it would take years and months to reach level 18 just by relying on a dungeon like the Valley of the Wind. After all, in the Valley of the Wind, the experience value of killing 10 monsters in the core area can equal the experience of 1 monster here. This is because he is of a low level and has bonus rewards for killing monsters beyond levels. Otherwise, when he reaches level 15 or above, in a dungeon like the Valley of the Wind, which only reaches level 20 at most, the experience points gained from killing monsters beyond the level will be extremely pitiful. But in this game reserve, there is no such worry at all. These level 30 Lord bosses who were far beyond the novice stage were far beyond him in level. Even after he reached level 20, he could still get experience points rewards for killing monsters beyond the level. Of course, game reserves are not without their drawbacks. After Zhou Jun slaughtered so many monsters, he had discovered that it seemed that he could only gain experience points in the hunting area, and no loot would be dropped at all. In other words, any monster that exists in reality will not drop loot. Loot seems to be the unique reward mechanism for killing monsters in the dungeon. It seems, it's impossible for me to level up by killing monsters in the hunting reserve all the time, because the equipment is only produced in dungeons. When I reach level 20 and need to change my equipment, I will still download the dungeon. Furthermore, if you want to obtain the essence and blood of a demon-level monster, you can only have a chance in the dungeon. Zhou Jun was thinking secretly in his mind while killing monsters. The emergence of game reserves does provide convenience for upgrading, but it cannot always be transitioned in this way. Because if you want to obtain more equipment and better skills, you can only do so by downloading a dungeon. Within the copy, there are infinite possibilities, and that is where the real opportunity lies. With a silent sigh, Joe Jun immersed himself in the Lord-level boss group and began to continue his upgrade plan. Time passed slowly, and a crescent moon climbed into the sky. Joe Jun has been killing for a whole day in the depths where monsters gather. And his level has also reached LV 17. Over the course of the day, he had killed countless Lord-level bosses, and his clothes and armor were already soaked in blood. The route along the way is even more strewn with demonic corpses, which frightens those who look at it, like a hell on earth. At this time, Joe Jun was sitting on the ground, slowly wiping the long knife in his hand with a piece of animal skin torn from an unknown monster. Under the moonlight, the blade of thunder tribulation shone with a cold light, reflecting the young man's resolute face. After a while, Joe Jun looked up and looked around after taking a short rest. There were almost no living monsters around him. Moreover, as he progressed tirelessly, Joe Jun himself did not know where he was in the hunting reserve at this moment. All I know is that the originally open, grassland-like plains have long since disappeared, and the surrounding environment has turned back into mountains again, with an aura of desolation spreading. However, Joe Jun did not panic. The size of a hunting reserve was always limited, and he estimated that he would be able to reach the exit on the other side soon. It's a pity that we haven't killed enough yet. There is still some experience left before reaching level 18. Let's look for any monsters overnight to see if there are any missing monsters. Joe Jun shook his head, with some regret in his eyes. He had killed all the level 30 Lord bosses in the place where monsters gathered just now. Now it is not easy to find a place where such a large number of monsters gather again. It is even difficult to say whether there is a second gathering place for monsters in this hunting reserve. I can only walk around casually and see if I can encounter some monsters with luck. With this thought in mind, Joe Jun stood up, facing the moonlight, and continued walking deep into the forest. In the blink of an eye, another 2 or 3 hours passed. Joe Jun, who had completely penetrated this mountain range, frowned deeply. During this period of time, he discovered a total of 2 level 26 monsters. Although the experience points provided were in the thousands, compared with the level 30 monsters he had hunted before, they were still too inferior. The most annoying thing is that if the number was larger, he would not tolerate it. But there are only 2 ends. If he continues with this efficiency, even if he searches until dawn, he may not be able to reach level 18. It's difficult. The number of monsters was so small that Joe Jun became a little upset. He raised his head and glanced at the dark and quiet mountains, which seemed to have no end at a glance, and he couldn't help but weigh in his mind whether to continue moving forward or return the same way. After all, there seems to be really no monsters on this route. That's all. Let's change the route. After some thought, Joe Jun decided to return the same way. But just as he was about to turn around and leave, he glanced at a dark place from the corner of his eye, and his whole movement suddenly froze in place. Because in his sight, in the darkness not far away, there was a strange light at this moment, penetrating through the woods and emitting. This is. As soon as his thoughts moved, he seemed to have thought of something, and rushed over in a flash. A few minutes later, Joe Jun came to the light, his face full of surprise. In front of him, the void was shattered, the air was rippled, and a dark purple vortex portal was slowly condensing into shape in midair. Could it be that I encountered a random refresh in the wild dungeon? Joe Jun looked at the scene in front of him with an extremely surprised expression. Unexpectedly, he did not find the monster, but encountered the formation of a brand new copy in the deep mountains and old forests of this hunting reserve. Yes, the number of copies is not always fixed. In addition to the permanent dungeons like the Valley of the Wind, there are also many dungeons that will be refreshed one after another in the wild. Some experts and scholars have stated that nearly 200 brand new copies are randomly formed every day on the vast blue star. They may be in inaccessible mountain forests, or on untrodden snow-capped mountains, or even in the abyss of the sea. Therefore, the number of undiscovered copies on Blue Star is increasing every day. Joe Jun obviously had a sudden burst of luck and encountered a brand new copy that was being formed. He stopped looking for monsters now, and instead sat down cross-legged on the spot, wanting to see what level this brand new copy was. Time passed like this. About an hour later, under the flickering moonlight, this dark purple vortex portal finally took shape. Copy name, Forgotten City. Recommended level, LV30, LV40. A line of information appeared in front of my eyes. Joe Jun's heart skipped a beat and he stood up from the ground, his face covered with a rich look of joy. This turned out to be a high-level dungeon with a high level. The highest recommended level is LV40, which means that the upper limit of the monster level in this dungeon is this number. Level 40. The experience that each monster can provide is simply unimaginable. As for strength, although Joe Jun is only level 17 now, he is not afraid. Because he is the Emperor, ranked first in the Federation's God list for hundreds of years. No matter how strong the monsters in this dungeon are, Joe Jun still thinks that he is capable of fighting them. So what if the final Lord Boss reaches level 40? His total attributes are close to 60,000, he possesses immortal skills, and even has a heaven-defying awakening skill that temporarily increases his combat power by 10 times. Once turned on, his total body attributes soared to an astonishing 600,000. Even if it only lasts for 10 seconds, it is enough for him to bulldoze all-powerful enemies. Therefore, Joe Jun almost did not hesitate and immediately walked towards the whirlpool. Warn: the current level is seriously behind the recommended level of the dungeon. The risk of death is as high as 99%. Are you sure you want to enter by force? Sure. With a thought, Joe Jun's figure disappeared into the whirlpool. As for the so-called warning and the 99% risk of death, he simply ignored it. These are just tips for an ordinary level 17 skybreaker, but how can he be an ordinary person? With absolute strength and the belief that I am invincible, Joe Jun is not afraid of anything. At the same time, as he entered, he felt a blur in front of his eyes, and his figure appeared in a strange ruins. This is a dilapidated ancient city, with the smell of decay floating in the air. Wherever you look, there are ruins and ruins. Even if there are occasionally well-preserved buildings and houses, they are all extremely old. When he stepped into a brand new dungeon for the first time, Joe Jun also looked serious. He did not act rashly, but after a short observation, he determined a direction and walked forward. Hoo. As he moved, this ancient city, which had been abandoned for who knows how many years, seemed to come to life. A gust of wind blew out of thin air, blowing the flags hanging at the roadside wine shops. At the same time, various strange sounds also sounded in the city one after another. Faced with all this, Joe Jun just snorted coldly and walked forward without changing his expression. It wasn't until he turned a corner that his figure suddenly stopped. Because in front of him, a skeleton monster wearing torn clothes with only a skeleton left was slowly walking towards him. Name: the undead civilian swallowed by the wind and sand. HP: 108,000. Level: 35. Class: Elite. Looking at the information about the skull monster in front of him, Joe Jun was amazed. It is different from the previous beast-like monsters without intelligence. In dungeons around level 30 or 40, you can start to encounter undead, elves, goblins and other humanoid monsters one after another. But the skeleton in front of me is just the lowest form of the undead race. With Joe Jun's strength, he can completely crush the opponent. With a strength attribute of up to 15,000, coupled with the small sword moves from the 7 deadly sins, you can directly clear the opponent's 10,800 health bar with just one strike. Therefore, without any unnecessary nonsense, Joe Jun stepped forward directly with the knife. Brush. A cold light flashed in the air, and the fire of life in the empty eye sockets of this skull monster was extinguished on the spot, and it was instantly killed. Kill LV35 Elite Undead Monster. Experience value plus 1,882. Get loot X1. 3 lines of prompts floated in front of his eyes, but Joe Jun was not very satisfied. Although this monster's level is as high as 35, its racial class is very low. Therefore, the experience gained from killing it is even worse than the level 30 Lord Boss in the hunting reserve. However, after entering the dungeon and killing monsters for the first time, loot exploded, which surprised Joe Jun. He didn't hesitate and touched the trophy light ball directly. Open the loot and get the special prop, Imperial City Order by 1 inch. Name: Imperial City Order 1/100. Grade, Silver. Explanation: the designated props of the Forgotten City dungeon will definitely drop when you kill monsters. After collecting a certain number, unexpected effects will be triggered. Looking at the golden token in front of him, which was like a token made of gold, Jo-jun let out a startled sound. This is actually a rare item specified in the instance, and a certain amount needs to be collected before it will take effect. It seems that this Forgotten City is not simple. Dungeons like this containing designated props are extremely rare. Jo-jun has lived in the past and present for so many years, and has only heard about it on the internet but has never seen it in reality. But, will one explode after killing one monster? Do I have to kill 100 such undead to collect them all? Jo-jun touched his chin, looked at the Imperial City Order in his hand, and suddenly had a toothache. It is not difficult for him to kill 100 monsters. What is difficult is whether there are really so many monsters for him to kill in this dungeon. During the 1,000-year exploration of the Federation, it was found that the number of monsters in most dungeons was generally around 50 or 60. That's why Jo-jun had this doubt. If he really killed a monster and exploded an Imperial City Order, he might have to enter this dungeon twice in a row. No. Maybe each monster's loot can contain multiple Imperial City Orders, but I was just unlucky and only opened one. Jo-jun suddenly shook his head again. He felt that the mechanism of this copy should not be so troublesome. Even if it's not, there's no point in thinking so much now. You still have to experiment to find out the true knowledge, and you'll know it first. So Jo-jun sped up his movements, and in the next hour, he scanned the periphery of this abandoned ancient city. During this period, he killed a total of 23 elite-level monsters and 2 leader-level monsters. A total of 35 Imperial City Orders were obtained. As he thought later, the number of Imperial City Orders in the Loot Light group is not fixed. It is probably that the higher the level of the monster, the more it will get. But now, there is no living monster around this dungeon. The remaining Imperial City Orders can only be obtained by entering the core area. Jo-jun put his hands behind his back and walked forward. Soon he entered a city that was obviously wider. The buildings here are very tall and magnificent. Even though many of them have been weathered by the years, it is not difficult to see how gorgeous they once were from the remaining outlines. Roar. As Jo-jun walked through the streets of the ancient city, there was also a harsh neighing sound in the distance. Jo-jun looked around and found that among the collapsed houses on both sides of the road, several undead monsters in the shape of wild dogs suddenly emerged. It was clear that only the skeletons were left on their bodies, but they were still grinning. Above their heads, the LV-38 level mark is quite eye-catching. It seems that I have indeed stepped into the core area. Looking at the monster that was obviously higher than the peripheral level, Jo-jun felt happy, as if he saw a huge amount of experience points waving to him. At that moment, it turned into a meteor and flew forward, kicking out a bone-crushing kick, directly knocking the first undead wild dog it encountered to the ground. Then he raised his hand, and lightning suddenly appeared in his hand, and the damage caused by the thunder tribulation was replenished. Kill the LV-38 leader-level monster corrupted undead dog. Experience value plus 2,499. Get loot X1. The system prompt appeared in front of his eyes, but Jo-jun ignored it and continued to take action. It wasn't until he killed all the undead wild dogs here that he took the time to look at this wave of harvest. Defeating 4 monsters in total provided him with approximately 10,000 experience points. From the Trophy Light group, 32 Imperial City Orders were found, which was a very impressive number. This gave him some peace of mind. It seemed that there was no need to clear the second copy. The Imperial City Order exploded in one trip should be enough to complete 100, and there might even be a few more. Thinking of this, he walked firmly and continued to move deeper into the copy. Along the way, there were many monsters similar to this corrupted undead dog, but they were no match for him. After killing the LV-39 monster, Jo-jun finally received an upgrade. Congratulations! You have successfully reached level 18. You have unlocked the core skill bar. 2 prompts sounded, and Jo-jun quickly looked at his personal panel. As expected, I found that there was a brand new status bar on the panel, but it was still empty now. With his previous life experience, Jo-jun didn't pay much attention to it. After this core skill bar is opened, you can assemble core skills at any time, and it will have no impact on his continued upgrading. On the contrary, as he killed monsters again and again, Zhou Jun found that his weapons could not keep up with the intensity of the current battle. Extreme Blade, Thunder Tribulation. Although it has mythical quality, it is only dropped by killing level 7 boss level monsters in the Dark Forest. Even after being sublimated, its effects can only be used up to level 20. Now, the monsters Zhou Jun challenges are often level 30 or 40. The intensity of the Thunder Tribulation obviously could no longer keep up. Even if it weren't for Zhou Jun's super high strength attribute, the attacks from Thunder Tribulation might not even be able to break through the defenses of these monsters. Oh, it's time to update the equipment again. Zhou Jun sighed, feeling a little headache. Because he has immortal level sword skills, the weapons he uses are temporarily classified as swords. If he wants to change weapons, he can only move closer to this aspect. Since ancient times, we have been poor in literature and rich in military affairs. The same goes for the Skybreaker. Because equipment has level restrictions, once your own strength improves, you have to start replacing equipment. Generally speaking, the applicable range of a piece of equipment is only within level 20. In other words, if a Skybreaker wants to upgrade from level 0 to level 100, at least 5 sets of equipment must be transitioned during this period. However, equipment is hard to find. You know, this thing is only produced in dungeons, and the explosion rate is not high. After all, even if you are lucky enough to kill a monster and get a trophy light ball, you may not be sure that you will get the equipment. What if it's a prop, secret medicine, or skill book? Even further, even if you really get the equipment, it may not be what you want. There are also big differences between equipment, different types, different qualities. Take Zhou Jun as an example. He can tolerate it when it comes to jewelry, as long as the difference is big enough. But in terms of armor, it must be heavy armor. The same is true for weapons, which must be consistent with the skills mastered. Now that he understands the true meaning of swords and possesses immortal sword skills, he can only choose this type of weapon. Either rely on luck to directly discover a new sword from the dungeon, or go back to the city and find a trading house to buy it. Anyway, I still have tens of millions in my card. I can just buy one of mythical quality and upgrade it myself. Touching his chin, Zhou Jun thought secretly. Possessing the heaven-defying talent of infinite sublimation, he is destined to never lack top-level resources in his life. Even if the copy doesn't give him what he wants, he can still buy it through the auction house. At this time, Zhou Jun shook his head and no longer considered the equipment issues. Based on the principle of being casual, Zhou Jun continued to move deeper into the dungeon. Although the Thunder Tribulation was greatly reduced in power, Lord Zhou was not an ordinary person after all. With an attribute value of over 10,000 points, even holding a shovel can still do decent damage. Therefore, it is still easy to hunt monsters. Even leader-level monsters can still be dealt with within 3 swords. As for the monsters in the core area, compared to those in the periphery, not only have their levels increased, but their numbers have also increased dramatically. This made Zhou Jun laugh so hard that he looked like a murderer. He completely let go of his arms and legs and ran rampant. He was more excited to see monsters than beautiful women. You can gain at least 2,500 experience points by slaughtering any animal. Zhou Jun has lived for so many years in this life and has never tasted such good food. What kind of miserable life did I live in the past? Zhou Jun looked back at the past. Forget it, he couldn't bear to look back. He turned all the grievances in his past life into the power to hunt monsters at this time. He used a horizontal sword to make a fierce move, pushing forward all the way. By the afternoon, all the monsters in the core area had been killed by Zhou Jun. Because there were all undead monsters in this copy, Zhou Jun was not covered in blood like before. He was now wearing clean clothes that he took the time to change into after entering the dungeon. He was standing in front of the final boss level with his hands behind his hands, his handsome face filled with pride. Just because above his head, a LV20 level information is extremely eye-catching. That's right, after an afternoon of hard work and using all the monsters in the core area of the entire dungeon as nourishment, Zhou Jun's level finally climbed up 2 steps again. Today's Zhou Jun has officially left the novice category in terms of level. His attribute panel also became more and more impressive. Name: Zhou Jun. Level LV20, 1%. Strength 20,700 plus 1,392. Agility 20,700 plus 958. Spirit 20,700 plus 502. Physique 20,700 plus 1,136. Skills Broken Bone LV2, Sword Holding Mind LV1, Rhapsody of Sins LV1, Divine Forbidden Realm LV1. Equipment Falling Star Pendant Epic Extreme Blade, Thunder Tribulation Mythical Ring of Endless Life Epic Crazy Dragon Soaring into the Sky Set Epic. Talent SSS Level Redistribution, SSS Level Unlimited Sublimation Only. Awakening Skill Ultimate Sublimation LV1. Core Skills None. Weapon Proficiency Sword LV1. For Joe Jun, who has reached level 20, the panel information has been updated again. The most conspicuous thing is that the Bone Crushing skill has been upgraded. It doesn't take long to acquire this skill. Although it is only gold level, it is easy to use and its defense breaking effect is very effective in actual combat. Therefore, when Joe Jun is hunting monsters, he will often release a Bone Crusher first, and then use Thunder Tribulation to harvest the monsters after they break through their defenses. Over time, his Bone Broken level also improved. After arriving at LV2, the probability of breaking the defense has increased a lot, and the subsequent shock wave effect has also been significantly enhanced. Coupled with his current strength attribute of 20,700 points, anyone who touches it will be disabled, and anyone who touches it will die. If you encounter an opponent of Yang Tianu's level again, even if the opponent is wearing a full set of epic armor, he can still kick him into the ICU. His strength can only be described as terrifying. Among his peers, he is truly invincible. At this moment, after adjusting his state and looking at the final checkpoint in front of him, Joe Jun no longer hesitated and strode in directly. This is an abandoned square, with rugged rocks and a dilapidated atmosphere at first glance. But Joe Jun didn't need to search at all. He saw the Lord Boss at a glance, just because the other party was too conspicuous. It was a skeleton about 10 meters high. I couldn't tell what kind of creature it was when it was still alive. I could only guess from the vague outline that it should be some kind of ferocious monster. It was lying on the ground, with fierce flames beating in a pair of huge eye sockets. Name: the Undead Ghost of Foolish Loyalty. HP: 568,000. Level: 40. Class: Lord level. Explanation: the sitting beast of the Forgotten City Emperor is responsible for guarding the palace gate. After the palace was destroyed, it still stayed there stupidly until it died of old age. The other party's information appeared in front of my eyes. Joe Jun couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This is just an ordinary Lord level monster, but with a level as high as 40, it has a terrifying blood volume of 560,000, and its resistance should not be low. There is no doubt that this will be a tough battle. But Joe Jun showed no fear. Just because he is now more than twice as powerful as when he first entered the dungeon. The single attribute alone is 20,800, and the total attributes of the whole body exceed 80,000. With such strength, Joe Jun believed that it was impossible to lose. Even if he has surpassed 20 levels, even if he is attacking the Lord Boss alone, he will still look at him with his hands behind his back. Roar! A huge beast roar came out, and it was unclear how this undead creature with only a skeleton left could make the sound. After the two looked at each other from a distance, neither one took a step back. Instead, their movements were almost synchronized, and they both rushed towards the other fiercely. In the empty square, two figures passed each other. In front of the huge body of this Lord Boss, Joe Jun looked extremely small. But his momentum is extremely astonishing, his eyes are full of fighting spirit, and he has an invincible belief. With an agility attribute of up to 20,000 points, he was able to dodge the opponent's attacks with ease and ease. And while the dark horizontal sword in his hand was turning, it had already struck 3 consecutive blows to the Lord Boss. 33,001, 37,014, 61,879. 3 eye-catching damage numbers appeared above the monster's head. Although this Lord Boss has good defense and resistance, with Joe Jun's strength attribute of up to 20,000 points, ordinary attacks can still deal considerable damage. The last one was even more lucky to trigger a critical hit. If the weapon in my hand is an artifact above level 20, these 3 swords can cut off at least half of its health. Zhou Jun looked at the string of damage numbers and shook his head dissatisfied. In his opinion, with the terrifying power of up to 20,700 points, even if the Lord monster in front of him has extremely good resistance, ordinary attacks should not only deal more than 30,000 damage. In the final analysis, it is the level of the weapon that holds it back. The various attributes of Thunder Tribulation are indeed unable to exert their effects in a copy of this level. He sighed quietly in his heart, but Zhou Jun was not too depressed. If the equipment is not good, the skills are enough. He also has immortal level sword skills at his side, which can provide huge damage blessings. Even with some effort, the final outcome of today's Lord Boss cannot escape the word death. And at this moment, the terrifying and ferocious Lord Monster also noticed the terrifying power hidden in the thin body of the seemingly weak human being in front of him, and a pair of eyes of the undead decorated with ghostly fire became humane and fearful. It took a few steps back and kept looking at Mr. Zhou, as if to spy on his weaknesses. "Didn't your mother tell you? Is it impolite to look at others?" Zhou Jun snorted coldly, and as he spoke, the horizontal sword in his hand shone with lightning, and his whole body turned into an afterimage, leaping 20 or 30 meters, and slashed head-on towards the huge skeleton. The collapse of rage. A terrifying and boundless aura erupted from his body, and a layer of air waves visible to the naked eye spread around the blade, sweeping across the surroundings and causing ripples in the air. 55,533. Another eye-catching number emerged. After using the sword moves of the Seven Sins sect, the damage is indeed much higher than ordinary slashing. If a critical strike is triggered, it is very likely that the sword will exceed 100,000. The most terrifying thing is that Zhou Jun can release such small sword moves unlimited times without cooling down. As long as your physical strength is not exhausted, it doesn't matter if you perform the sevenfold sword style in turn. And with Zhou Jun's consecutive slashes, he successfully reduced the blood volume of the Lord Boss in front of him to 2/3. The latter was obviously beaten into a daze. What followed was uncontrollable rage. As undead creatures, tirelessness and fear are their greatest advantages, so after a brief surprise, they charged at Zhou Jun again without even taking a step back. Roar. With a thundering roar, an energy filled with the aura of death gathered in its mouth, forming a dazzling laser-like beam. As it ran, it sprayed accurately towards Zhou Jun. Starting to use skills. Zhou Jun raised his eyebrows when he saw this, but there was not much movement in his eyes. As his figure flashed, his flexible body skills were displayed again. The whole person is like a ghost, and he dodges all the skills of this Lord Boss in the blink of an eye. In addition to his high agility attributes, the ability to display such physical skills is also inseparable from his large amount of actual combat experience. You know, Zhou Jun had come all the way from the hunting reserve before this. The hunting area is all Lord level boss, and each one has its own different skills. They will not be hunted by Zhou Jun like lambs to be slaughtered. Instead, he was extremely ferocious, using various skills to attack Zhou Jun in turn. Under such high-intensity fighting, his body skills naturally grew rapidly and became more and more outstanding. Besides, although the current undead Lord Boss is of a high level, its attack methods seem to be very simple, and its skills are not the kind of large-scale magic damage that is gorgeous and difficult to avoid, so Zhou Jun can deal with it with ease. Even if he was occasionally hit by an attack, it would only be a slight touch and would not pose a substantial threat to him. In this way, the two started fighting back and forth in this secret realm. A few minutes later, the huge skeletal body of Lord Boss was already covered with knife marks left by Lord Zhou. Its blood volume was finally suppressed to a trace of blood. Intruder. At this moment, it was exuding a terrifying aura, it was speaking strangely human words, and fierce undead fire was burning all over its body. +13434. +14231. +12353. As the undead fire burned, the blood volume of this Lord Boss was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. It would take up to 30 or 40 seconds before it could reach its prime again. Have you entered a violent state? Zhou Jun frowned. The reason why Lord Boss is different from ordinary monsters is that they possess various powerful violent characteristics, which will be forcibly triggered once certain conditions are met. The condition for most boss to become violent is that the blood volume is lower than a certain threshold. Like the undead skeleton beast in front of me, its conditions for becoming violent are also the same. But what Zhou Jun didn't expect was that unlike other BOSSs that increased damage after going berserk, it actually restored its own blood volume. You are quite afraid of death, but you dare to regain your health in front of me. Are you treating me as a decoration? But Zhou Jun sneered, with a chill in his voice. He glanced at the growing blood volume, no longer held back, and raised the long knife in his hand mercilessly. In an instant, countless sword shadow clones appeared around him, all rushing towards the monster, with air waves rolling and sword intent soaring into the sky. Rhapsody of conviction. Once again, Zhou Jun displayed his immortal level skills, and terrible power swept around. Under the huge increase in damage, Thunder Tribulation once again showed its power, infinite lightning arcs flashed, and the paralysis effect made the opponent's huge body stiffen. At the same time, as the sword shadow danced wildly, the special effects of the mad dragon soaring into the sky suit were constantly triggered, and the dragon's breath spurted out one after another. The terrible burning effect also stopped the opponent's continuous recovery of blood volume. At this time, all the attacks of the clones dissipated, and the release of immortal skills ended. After Zhou Jun completed the last horizontal slash, he jumped into the air and threw the horizontal knife in his hand fiercely towards the skull of the undead boss. There was a click. The long knife went straight into the center of the skull and penetrated deeply, leaving only the handle. At the same time, the health bar of this powerful undead monster was finally completely emptied, the fire of life was extinguished, and the huge body collapsed heavily to the ground. Zhou Jun landed on the ground with a confident look in his eyes. Counterattack against LV-40 Lord Boss, success. Kill the undead spirit of the LV-40 Lord level monster Yu Zhang. Experience value plus 56,905. Get loot x3. In the square that was reduced to ruins, Zhou Jun stood quietly in front of the huge corpse. At his feet were 3 trophy light groups that exuded soft light. He first looked at the system prompts in front of him, then lowered his head to look at the shiny trophy, and finally there was a hint of joy on his face. It is worthy of being a level 40 Lord Boss, and the rewards are really generous. With more than 50,000 experience points recorded, he was about to reach level 21 in one go. Not to mention the trophies, blasting out 3 light groups in one breath was definitely possessed by the European Emperor. It's cool, let's see what rewards we can find. Zhou Jun was happy, smiling, and squatted down to open the blind box. He stretched out his right hand and quickly swept over the 3 light groups one after another. The next moment the dazzling light disappeared, and 3 items appeared in front of him. They are an accessory, a skill book, and a familiar Imperial City token. The moment Zhou Jun saw the 3rd item, he couldn't help but curled his lips. Why is it that even the Lord Boss must destroy the Imperial City Order? To be honest, he had already fulfilled the collection conditions of the Imperial City Order by fighting all the way. There are 107 of these things lying in the space backpack now, which is too much. A somewhat disgusted look casually glanced at the newly revealed Imperial City Order. Zhou Jun was about to throw it into his backpack, but suddenly his expression was startled. Because the information presented in this Imperial City Order is very different from what was collected before. Name: Royal City Order. Grade: Myth. Description: it is an old thing of the Forgotten City Emperor. When you hold it, it will cause real damage to all monsters in the Forgotten Palace. This is. Seeing the completely different explanation in front of him, Zhou Jun was stunned. This Royal City Order is completely different from the previous Imperial City Order, more like a special piece of equipment. He had a vague feeling that this thing would be of great use soon. After thinking about it, Zhou Jun put it away solemnly, and then decided to read through the other 2 trophies first. His eyes fell on the first jewelry. Name: earrings made from the bones of the undead. Grade: excellent. Type: jewelry. Restrictions: LV35 LV50. Spirit: plus 2367. Agility: plus 2589. Description: the trophies rewarded for hunting the undead of Yu Zhang. When equipped, it can cause a 14% increase in damage to all undead creatures. This is just an ordinary piece of excellent quality equipment, and because the level of the boss just now was too high, the equipment that was revealed can only be used at a minimum of level 35. Zhou Jun is currently unable to wear it at all and can only watch. This caused all his enthusiasm to be extinguished and he felt very depressed. He thought he could replace a shotgun with a cannon and get another good piece of equipment at his disposal, but in the end, he wasn't even given the chance to use it. This resulted in Joe Jun not even bothering to upgrade it. He couldn't wear it anyway. He would wait until he reached level 35. After feeling slightly disappointed, he turned his attention to the skill book. Skill books are different from equipment. There is no level limit for this thing, so Joe Jun is looking forward to it. Name: Flame Palm of the Undead. Grade: Myth. Type: Melee Skill Book. Effect: a palm technique from the Undead clan. When released, the anger of death is condensed in the palm, which can release a long-distance fire shock wave, causing 150% damage to one's own spiritual attributes. At the same time, undead flames are added, causing an additional 5 seconds, burning damage. After seeing the detailed information, Joe Jun had obvious surprise on his face. He didn't expect that a rare hand-to-hand skill book would be revealed this time. To be honest, this type of skill book is very suitable for Joe Jun to some extent. Because of the existence of redistribution, his physique is extremely powerful, and he is taking the route of physical sanctification. And once you have serious melee skills, Joe Jun will have a real opportunity to show off his heaven-defying attribute values. His combat power will be greatly improved. Unfortunately, the skill book called Undead Flame Palm in front of me is obviously a bit stretched. Judging from the description of its effect, it seems to be more like a long-range magic attack, which is not consistent with the punch-to-flesh melee style in my impression. So there was nothing to regret. Joe Jun directly used the power of sublimation on it. At this moment, with the activation of the power of sublimation, waves of familiar and huge weakness surged throughout his body. But Joe Jun was not surprised but happy. Because this feeling is so familiar to him. This is the feeling of exhaustion that only occurs after perfect sublimation is triggered and the quality of something reaches a super leap. It must have been shipped. Sure enough, as he looked at it, the gorgeous skill book was constantly changing at this moment. In the end, it became an ancient golden page unique to the immortal level skill book. Name: Demon Hell Flame Empty Fist. Grade: Immortal. Type: Melee Skill Book. Effect 1: a powerful immortal combat skill sublimated from mythical skills. Anyone who masters this skill will be entangled in death fire every time he attacks with fists and feet, causing each attack to increase damage. It can also cause the enemy to enter a burning and defense-breaking state. Effect 2: after active release, it will chase enemies within the range, move like lightning, and launch attacks like thunder and wind. When the final blow is made, it will send out a sky-splitting fist, causing 200% of its total attributes. Horrible damage. Cooling 1000s. When the introduction to the skill book on the gold page came into view, Joe Jun's breath froze. Too strong. He had no idea that as a mythical quality skill book, it would be so effective. But after sublimation, it transformed into an unparalleled and extraordinary boxing technique. This is a true melee skill. Like Rhapsody of Conviction, it has two effects. The first effect does not require any prerequisites or cooling time. The so-called death fire will be automatically attached as long as he attacks. It is simply a powerful passive skill. As for the second effect, it is explained after active release. This is also what shocked Joe Jun the most. Because it can actively chase enemies within range. Based on this alone, it is worthy of the name of immortality and can be called a divine skill. Not to mention that in the final blow, it can also cause a percentage increase in damage based on its own total attributes. This is simply tailor-made for Joe Jun. You know, his total attributes are full at every level. Obviously, as his level gradually increases, the damage of this skill will continue to increase. It can be said that if this characteristic is applied to other people, the effect may not be so outstanding, but in Joe Jun's case, it is a qualitative change. This gave Joe Jun a premonition. Both are immortal level skills, but Devil Flame Empty Fist definitely improves his combat power more than Rhapsody of Conviction. Life is like this, you never know which surprise will come first. Before Joe Jun entered this dungeon, he would never have imagined that he would be able to gain another immortal skill. Sure enough, as long as you enter the dungeon, there are endless possibilities. With a sigh in his heart, Joe Jun shook the thin gold page in his hand and chose to study. Then the simple golden page turned into a gleam of brilliance and merged into Zhou Jun's mind. In an instant, various forms of boxing and combat skills were poured into him. Including his limbs and bones, they seemed to have been tempered thousands of times at this moment, and every move was filled with the majestic charm of martial arts. After a few breaths, Zhou Jun suddenly opened his eyes. 2 long rainbows were spit out from his mouth and nose, and they exploded in the air. As for him, he took advantage of the situation and launched a set of stunning punches as fast as lightning. Every movement of the body, every punch was delivered with a calm posture, like a great master who had been immersed in martial arts for many years. Acquired the skill, Devil Flame Air Fist LV 1 inch. You have understood the true meaning of fists and kicks, and your melee proficiency has reached LV1. 2 reminders appeared in front of my eyes one after another. After a while, Zhou Jun nodded slightly. He stood up with his fist closed, and his whole fisting intention was restrained again. Martial arts practice emphasizes the accumulation of energy and the concentration of energy within the body. If it does not move, it will stop, and when it moves, it will be like thunder. At this moment, Zhou Jun already has the demeanor of a martial arts master. Moreover, just like when he understood Rhapsody of Conviction after reading this immortal level boxing skill book, his hand-to-hand proficiency also reached LV1. This will increase the damage caused by his fists and kicks. After taking inventory of all the harvest, Zhou Jun walked over to the monster's body and pulled out the horizontal knife he had thrown away from the center of the huge skull. After taking a look at the blade, he found that there were faint traces of fragmentation spreading on the once bright blade, and he couldn't help but shake his head. After a hard fight, this thunder tribulation was completely scrapped. Even if it continues to be used now, it can no longer produce the same effect it once had on chopping melons and vegetables. Fortunately, he has now mastered an immortal level boxing technique, which has supplemented his attack methods. Putting away the thunder tribulation that had been with him for so long, Zhou Jun glanced at the customs clearance prompt that had not yet been announced. After thinking about it, he took out the Imperial City Order he had collected previously. This thing must have been used in the dungeon, and seeing that there was no clearance prompt, Zhou Jun had already guessed something. Sure enough, as the 107 Imperial City Orders appeared in the air, they were immediately condensed together by a mysterious force, merged into one in midair, gradually enlarged, and finally turned into a huge portal. Meet the collection conditions of the Imperial City Order 107 100ths and open the limited time hidden copy, Forgotten Palace. Copy name, Forgotten Palace. Recommended level, LV40, LV60. Copy description, an advanced copy of Forgotten City, hidden for a limited time, with multiple accessible passages. As his thoughts flashed, lines of information appeared in front of his eyes. Zhou Jun, who saw this scene clearly, touched his chin in surprise. The effect of this Imperial City Order was actually quite different from what he had guessed before. The only thing he didn't expect was that this was a limited time copy with multiple entrances. This shows that Imperial City Order is not a unique product of Forgotten City, and it is likely to have a chance of exploding in other dungeons. Of course, this other copy does not include the old copy that was generated before. It refers to the new batch of copies generated today. If someone is as lucky as him and enters the newly generated dungeon, and successfully collects the Imperial City token, then it is very likely that they will meet in this hidden dungeon called Forgotten Palace. At this time, after Zhou Jun had judged everything, he looked at the entrance to the copy again. It is different from the previous dark purple copy entrance. This hidden copy is extremely ferocious in appearance, a blood-red vortex that is constantly rotating. A hint of danger is constantly exuding above it. The high-level limit of LV60 also shows that this is no ordinary copy. Zhou Jun is only level 20 now. If he wants to challenge this dungeon, it means that he must have the combat power to reach 40 levels in a row. Such a shocking act has never happened before in the entire history of the Federation. But Zhou Jun felt vaguely in his heart that he could break this history. After all, ordinary level 30 or 40 monsters can no longer satisfy him at all. And if you want to become an unparalleled genius in the supreme human race, you have to constantly challenge your own limits and grow in the world of blood and fire, life and death. Otherwise, how can we climb up to the stars and overlook the eternity? Zhou Jun only hesitated for a moment before stepping into it resolutely. Warn. The current level is seriously behind the recommended level of the dungeon. The risk of death is as high as 100%. Are you sure you want to enter by force? 100%. Looking at the prompt box that popped up in front of him, a smile suddenly appeared on the corner of Zhou Jun's mouth. Even the system thinks that no one in the world can challenge the dungeon beyond level 40. Then he must be the first person in eternity. Without any hesitation, Zhou Jun stepped directly into it. Boom! A huge vibrating sound reached his ears, and Zhou Jun felt his eyes spinning continuously. When he came back to his senses again, his figure had appeared on the vast land. In front of him was a majestic palace that covered a vast area and crawled on the ground like a giant beast. The palace was somewhat dilapidated, with many parts showing signs of damage, and the dark red walls seemed to be stained with a lot of blood, making some places so red that they turned black, and exuded a foul smell of blood. At first glance, it is chilling, and I feel that everything in this palace is weird. Zhou Jun III was a man with a strong mentality, but he was not frightened. But with an extremely cautious look on his face, he walked towards the huge palace gate. The two portals that symbolized the land of imperial power were also in dilapidated condition, especially the one on the right, which had a large hole 2 to 3 meters high in the middle, into which the howling cold wind was constantly pouring. Seeing this, Zhou Jun took a step forward and walked in from the cave. And as he stepped into the palace, a wave of resentment and decay that could only be found in the deep palace compound came overwhelmingly towards him. In a daze, he seemed to see countless evil ghosts, trying to pounce on him to claim his life. Snort. Zhou Jun frowned when he saw this, and stepped hard on the ground with his right foot. Immediately, a soaring sword intent swept out of himself, directly dispelling this strange negative aura. I want to see what kind of evil spirits and snake gods can be hidden in just an old palace that has been lost in history. With a cold snort, Zhou Jun took long steps and walked towards the depths of the palace. In the quiet and empty palace, Zhou Jun walked forward with his hands behind his back, a pair of sharp eyes sweeping around. This copy was very different from what he imagined. There were no monsters everywhere or dangerous mechanisms. As for the environment, because it was a palace setting, it belonged to the extremely rare ancient Daxia style, which made Zhou Jun look very strange. If you ignore the weird atmosphere, it will feel like walking in a scenic spot. Not long after, Zhou Jun, who was wandering around randomly, came to a side hall. In front of him was a deep corridor. And through the dilapidated plaque above the head, you can vaguely see the words, Chu Shu Palace. Although Zhou Jun didn't know much about the structure of the palace, he also knew that Chusho Palace was the residence of beautiful women thanks to the popularity of various palace fighting dramas in his previous life. Here, the showgirls will learn court etiquette and prepare to become a member of the palace. Raising his eyebrows slightly, Zhou Jun stepped forward and prepared to move forward. But at this moment, the hairs all over his body suddenly stood up, and he took a step back as fast as lightning. Then he saw ripples in the air suddenly where he had just stood, as if something sharp was waving there. If Zhou Jun had not dodged this move, he would have been disemboweled. This scene also made him frown deeply. Invisible monster. His sharp eyes flashed with a bit of anger, and he punched suddenly without giving the opponent a chance to sneak attack again. The blazing death fire wrapped around his arm. As the power of the fist exploded, the flames swept across him in an instant, and the fist's intention was overwhelming. Ah! A sharp scream was heard, and immediately where the fire fist landed, the air shook, and a figure with disheveled hair and a palace maid's outfit appeared in embarrassment. Her skin was green in the darkness, her mouth was sharp and her teeth were sharp, and her face was ferocious, like a zombie. Name: Cursed Palace Maid. HP: 178,000. Level: 45. Class: Elite. The zombie palace maid roared, seemed to be angered, and jumped towards Zhou Jun. The latter snorted coldly and punched again without mercy. In an instant, the dark fire surged, accompanied by an extremely fierce fist, directly blasting through the chest of the palace maid zombie. Kill the LV-45 elite monster and the cursed palace maid. Experience value plus 3,182. Killing a level 45 elite monster with 2 punches, Zhou Jun looked neither happy nor sad. He just kept frowning. This forgotten palace is indeed a hidden copy. It is just the lowest level monster, and it can become invisible. If placed in other dungeons, the palace-made zombie in front of her would be enough to serve as a leader-level monster based on her invisibility ability. Thinking of this, Zhou Jun's vigilance condensed a little more. After he opened the door of Chusho Palace, his 5 senses were immediately activated to the extreme. At this moment, Zhou Jun briefly touched the realm that only the strong can master. In his invisible perception, the palace garden in front of him was no longer empty, but instead was filled with invisible palace-made zombies. They were staring at him from different angles, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. Once he relaxes his vigilance, he will show his fangs and launch a fatal blow. It's interesting, but my life is not that easy to take. Zhou Jun, who knew everything, sneered, but saw that he actually closed his eyes at this moment. At this moment, the 5 senses are infinitely amplified. With his ears moving slightly, he actually launched an offensive based only on the sounds around his body and the flow of air. Boom! There was a loud noise, and Zhou Jun suddenly punched out, his domineering punch hitting the air, and then a ball of red and white brains flew into the air. It turned out to be a palace-made zombie lurking here, and her head was blown open by Zhou Jun's punch. Experience value plus 3,391. Another experience value was recorded. A smile appeared on Zhou Jun's lips, and he felt that he had found a new way of practice. While exercising your 5 senses, you can also gain experience points. So in the next time, I saw an extremely strange scene. In the deserted palace, Zhou Jun kept punching out, and with each burst of punching power, the figure of a monster would appear in midair. 10 minutes later, Zhou Jun swept away all the palace-made zombies and raised his level to LV21. When he opened his eyes again, the Chushu Palace in front of him seemed to become a bit more peaceful, and the atmosphere was no longer so eerie. It can be regarded as a successful sweep of a monster-gathering place. Interesting. This hidden copy not only has higher monster strength, but also seems to give more experience points. Zhou Jun touched his chin and felt that he really came to the right place this time. The 3-day deadline agreed with Chu Tianj was approaching. He thought that reaching level 20 would be the limit, but now, he felt that he could still push forward. With a thought, the upper limit of attribute points just upgraded was filled up again. Zhou Jun's average 4-dimensional score also reached 22,800 points. The strength has become stronger again. This real increase in combat power made him feel extremely at ease in his heart. At this moment, my confidence increased greatly. After taking one step out of Chusho Palace, I continued to move towards the depths of the palace. At the same time, somewhere in this palace, there are 3 figures moving forward slowly. They are an old man, a young man and a young man respectively. The old man, with gray hair and a cane in his hand, is obviously very old, but he still has an unusual pressure between his eyebrows. At first glance, he is a big shot who has been in high positions for a long time. But at this moment, he seemed to have suffered some hidden injury. Even when he walked, he had to be supported by the girl beside him. The girl who supported her was also quite eye-catching. She was 1.78 meters tall, youthful and beautiful, with a high black ponytail and a pure white training uniform. Gu Panjian's eyes are very smart, and she is a complete beauty. As for the last young man, he is much more ordinary, not outstanding in appearance, but very strong in stature. He stood by the old man's side without saying a word, seeming to be a bodyguard or guard. "Grandpa, don't worry, I already have enough information. This time we will definitely be able to find the secret medicine for extending life from this hidden copy." The girl was supporting the old man now, looking at the old man coughing from time to time, and said with some distress in her tone. When the old man heard this, he shook his head and smiled, looking at the girl with a doting look on his face. "Yao Yao, Grandpa has lived for more than 100 years and has seen enough ups and downs in this world. In order to enter the dungeon this time, the family has spent too much energy, so just do your best." "Grandfather." After hearing the old man's kind words, the girl's eyes were finally filled with tears, and her voice was choked. The young guard who always stood behind them to guard the two of them also looked gloomy at this moment. The old man is not an ordinary person, but the current head of the Lynn family in Jinling. He is a level 400 strong man who once killed dark creatures in the starry sky. He has been fighting to protect the human race all his life. But I don't expect that when I am old, the hidden diseases that I fought in my youth will appear. You know, a level 400 expert has a lifespan of nearly 200 years. But at this moment, the old man has just celebrated his 100th birthday, and his life has entered a countdown. How unfair is this to an old man who has dedicated his life to humanity? The Lynn family did not want to face such an outcome. Over the past year, they have tried their best to extend the life of the old man and treat his illness, but to no avail. And yesterday morning, the Lynn family unexpectedly learned that in the newly formed hidden copy of Blue Star Forgotten Palace, there is a high possibility that a secret healing medicine that can truly solve the old man's hidden disease will be produced. Although this secret medicine only lasts for a very short time, it must be taken promptly once it appears in the world, otherwise the effectiveness of the medicine will disappear. But it finally gave the Lynn family hope. So for this glimmer of hope, the Lynn family did not hesitate to spend a lot of money and used a precious item that allowed people to enter the dungeon regardless of level restrictions to send the old man in. That's how the current scene happened. Grandpa, I will definitely cure you successfully. Lin Muyao's tear-stained eyes were filled with firm belief at this moment. Somewhere in the palace, after Zhou Jun killed the monster blocking the road with another punch, he looked forward. This is a beautifully built courtyard. Although the walls and houses have been corroded by time, you can still imagine the luxurious and lively scene of the past. Above the courtyard, there are 3 words, Changchun Palace, written on it. This seems to be another gathering place for monsters in the palace copy. Zhou Jundong stepped in immediately. The entire palace is very spacious. At first glance, the feeling of desolation and dilapidation is spreading, but there is no smell of monsters. However, Zhou Jun did not relax his vigilance. He moved forward with his hands behind his hands. When he reached the depths of the courtyard, he suddenly raised his eyes. But he saw a crooked-necked tree not far in front of him. Under the thick branches, there was a human figure wearing a luxurious phoenix robe and hanging himself with a white silk ribbon. Named the undead princess who hanged herself to death. HP 398,000. Level 57. Class Leader. Zhou Jun's pupils shrank. This turned out to be a LV-57 leader level monster. The blood volume is close to 400,000. Although it is not as good as the Lord level undead boss that he hunted before, it should not be underestimated. After all, the level of this monster is too high, and it will definitely not be low in terms of defense and resistance. And at this moment, as Mr. Zhou approached step by step, the undead princess who had been motionless and hanging under the crooked neck tree slowly woke up at this time. She has a green face and fangs, like a zombie, and her sharp nails will tear off the white silk that restrains her. Death, death, death. Everyone deserves to die. The undead princess let out a sharp and harsh cry, with strong resentment emanating from her body. Immediately, her scarlet eyes stared at Zhou Jun, and she suddenly rushed over. A mere leader-level monster dares to be so rampant. Facing this scene, Zhou Jun shook his head without changing his expression. Even though the level of this monster was not low, it was not a problem for Zhou Jun. He just dodged sideways and easily dodged the attack. Then a straight punch entwined with hellfire hit the opponent's throat, knocking him back 3 to 5 meters. Sizzling. The underworld fire is sharp and burns everything. The neck of the zombie princess was only slightly stained, and white smoke billowed out, making sounds like barbecue. However, the latter's undead monster properties made it ignore the pain and still pounce towards Lord Zhou. The sharp claws scratched through the air, causing ripples and traces of poisonous mist spreading. The attack comes with poison. Zhou Jun frowned, and his light body immediately took a few steps back cautiously. He observed it and found that the toxin covered a wide area and it was not clear how much damage it would cause. But Zhou Jun was not willing to risk his life. He just watched his spiritual thoughts quickly scan through the space backpack, and finally took out a bottle of gold-level secret medicine. This was the loot he revealed when he killed the monsters in the core area in the Valley of the Wind instance. The effect is that after taking it, you can be immune to all negative effects within 1 minute. Toxin damage is naturally within the scope of immunity. After Zhou Jun drank it, he spread out his hands and feet, and his blood was flowing out, and he rushed towards the undead princess. In an instant, the hellfire surged into the sky, and various punches were displayed one after another. Although this undead princess has good resistance, the fireworks of Devil Flame Empty Fist have its own defense-breaking effect. Therefore, with every blow, there is terrible damage. 45,631. 43,345. 68,990. One eye-catching injury after another appeared on the head of this monster. Zhou Jun became more and more brave as he fought, like a god of war. And right now, outside the Changchun Palace, the old man, the young man, and the young man also came here. They heard the noise and saw what was happening in the palace at a glance. Besides us, there are other people coming into this hidden copy. Lin Muyao, a beautiful ponytail girl, said in surprise. Her eyes fell on Zhou Jun from a distance, and she was very surprised when she saw that the opponent's punches and kicks were doing a lot of damage and showing great fighting prowess. Even the old man couldn't stop stroking his beard in admiration after seeing clearly Zhou Jun's strength. I really didn't expect that in this hidden dungeon, I could see a junior with such strength. He dared to defeat the level 57 boss monster by himself. Both in terms of courage and strength, he is the best. If the younger generation is as brave as this little friend, why should our human race be unhappy? Lin Chengguo sighed quietly, admiration showing in his experienced eyes. The Lin family is located in Jinling and is a top wealthy family. Naturally, they attach great importance to the training of the younger generation. But in a big city like Jinling, the younger generations of the major families are all mixed. There are too many second-generation dandies, and there are very few geniuses who have both strength and character. With Lin Chengguo's sophisticated eyesight, he knew that Zhou Jun was truly a rare genius after just looking at the strength displayed in front of him for just a moment. Yaoer, you have an SSS-level talent, haven't you always looked down upon the children of various families in Jinling City? This kid in front of you is about the same age as you, what do you think of him? Lin Chengguo glanced at those who were watching the battle seriously. Lin Muyao suddenly smiled. Lin Muyao was startled when she heard this, and then her pretty little face showed the slightest hint of dissatisfaction, and she said crisply, "Grandpa compares me with him, does he mean to say that I am not as good as him?" She comes from a wealthy family in Jinling, possesses a rare SSS-level talent, and grew up under the tutelage of Lin Chengguo, so she has her own pride in her heart. Among the playboys of her generation in Jinling City, there were countless people pursuing her, but none of them could catch her eye. Not to mention Jinling, but looking at the entire southern territory and even Daxia Kingdom, she believed that she could not lose to anyone. Over the years, the only one who convinced her was the Emperor, who shocked the entire Federation a few days ago and reached the top of the God list. With a total attribute of 20,800 points at level 10, no matter how the opponent did it, she felt convinced. Although the person who appeared in front of her inexplicably seemed to have good combat power and could defeat level 57 boss monsters alone, she would not be convinced if he was said to be much better than her because of this. Because she can do the same by just brushing this undead princess. Thinking of this, Lin Muyao's desire to win was activated. She knew clearly that Lin Chengguo was just deliberately beating her up at this time, telling her to guard against arrogance and impetuosity and to stick to her heart, but she still felt dissatisfied deep down. It just so happened that the situation in the courtyard had reached a fever pitch, and the undead princess was going berserk and her combat power was greatly increased. When she saw this, her bright eyes rolled, and she suddenly stepped out, like a misty smoke, and joined the battlefield. "Classmate, let me help you." Then she heard Lin Muyao shouting loudly, and then a green magic skill was shot in her hand, landing directly on the undead princess, holding the opponent in place, and an eye-catching number appeared above her head. 107021. One attack, 100,000 damage. Directly suppressing the HP of the undead berserk princess to less than 3%. After doing all this, Lin Muyao stood in the field with some pride. She did not try to steal the experience of this princess monster, but turned to look at the old man, her pretty face full of smiles. Boom! At the same time, Zhou Jun struck out with another straight punch, knocking the undead princess with remaining health into the air and blasting her. The undead princess who killed the LV-57 leader monster and hanged herself to death. Experience value plus 9,890. Two prompts flashed in front of his eyes one after another, and Zhou Jun closed his fist and stood up. At the same time, a pair of unwavering eyes finally looked at Lin Changguo and others in the courtyard. In fact, he had already noticed the three of them when they approached the palace. It's just that when the battle with that monster was getting fierce, I couldn't be distracted. But at this moment, with the death of the undead princess, Zhou Jun was distracted and focused on these people. And the focus was on the girl who had just helped him. Deep in his eyes, a bit of surprise flashed through him at this moment. Because he knew this girl. Lin family, Lin Muyao. In his previous life, Zhou Jun traveled to many places for leveling up, and naturally he also visited Jinling City, which is also in the southern border and not far from Linyuan. The Lin family is considered the top wealthy family in Jinling City, and it is not an exaggeration to say that it is the first family. When Zhou Jun first went there, he heard the names of the Lin family, and among them, Lin Muyao's name was the one he heard the most. It is rumored that this girl was bred by the Lin family through thousands of years of luck. She possesses the rare SSS level combat talent Elemental Walker. She can easily master the power of various elements and fuse them together to form powerful attacks. In Jinling City, Lin Muyao was like a goddess. She was pursued by the children of all the major families, but no one could fall in the eyes of this woman. When Zhou Jun was training in Jinling City, a major event happened in the Lin family that impressed him deeply. That is the contemporary head of the Lin family, Lin Changguo, who only lived more than 100 years old, died of illness. It is said that it was because he failed to seek medicine in a dungeon that the hidden disease that had been left on the Starry Sky battlefield broke out, and he eventually died at the end of his life. Zhou Jun remembered that on the day Lin Changguo passed away, there was a heavy snowfall in Jinling and it was covered in silver. The residents of the city spontaneously mourned, and the city lord, on behalf of the Federation, personally went to the Lin family to mourn. All this is because the Lin family is one of the few practical families in Jinling that works for the benefit of the people. Many of its company products actually serve the people. Lin Changguo himself was a legendary hero who dedicated his life to the human race. He fought bravely on the battlefield of the stars and made great contributions to the Federation. Zhou Jun witnessed all this in Jinling City at that time and was very touched in his heart. He has always admired human martyrs like Lin Changguo who were willing to sacrifice themselves. Without their fearless fight in the Starry Sky battlefield, Blue Star would not be as prosperous as it is today. It's a pity that Mr. Zhou in his previous life was just one of the many living beings and could not help much with the Lin family's affairs. But he didn't expect to live a new life, and in this hidden copy, he would meet someone from the Lin family by chance. At this moment, he looked at the young and beautiful Lin Muyao, nodded slightly, and said thank you. He could tell that the girl in front of him didn't mean anything malicious. Moreover, after taking action just now, he did not deliberately perform last-ditch damage on the monster with remaining health. Instead, he actually helped him with a wave of damage and control. Therefore, regardless of whether Mr. Zhou needs this help or not, he should say thank you both emotionally and rationally. You're welcome. We are all Sky Defenders. Meeting each other in this hidden copy is a kind of fate. If you can help, you should help. Lin Muyao smiled and had a very easy-going attitude. She has the desire to win and pride that a genius should have, but she is not conceited, nor does she look down on others just because of her talent. This is very different from many children of aristocratic families. Seeing this, Zhou Jun couldn't help but feel a little more favorable toward the Lin family. At this time, Lin Changguo also walked over with the support of the young guard. It's true that a hero emerges from his youth. My little friend's movement skills when hunting monsters and the timing of releasing his skills just made me amazed. He chuckled, not even looking at his granddaughter, but kept praising Zhou Jun. When Lin Muyao saw this scene, she immediately curled her lips in grievance. Why does Grandpa only praise him and not me? Is this guy really that strong? She puffed out her pink cheeks, lost in thought. Zhou Jun glanced at her, feeling a little funny in his heart. This goddess of the Lin family, who is famous all over Jinling, is secretly jealous because she is not praised by her grandfather. If her suitors knew about it, their jaws would probably drop in shock, right? With this thought in his mind, Zhou Jun clasped his fists at Lin Changguo in a very serious manner on the surface. Senior, you have given me too much praise. Faced with this old man who devoted his whole life to the battlefield and did not even get a good death in the end, Zhou Jun still respected him very much. Lin Chengguo smiled heartily and said, "You don't have to be like this, little friend. Meeting each other in a hidden copy is a kind of fate. How about we go together? As for the distribution of experience, just share it equally between you and my little granddaughter." As soon as these words came out, Lin Muyao and the young guard behind the old man, a Zhuang, were shocked. They didn't expect that Lin Chengguo would take the initiative to invite others to join the team. Especially young Zhuang, as Lin Chengguo's personal guard, he has seen too many young heroes come to visit Mr. Lin with their elders over the years. But among them, very few people can receive such high praise, let alone being actively invited by the old man to join the team and play dungeons together. The kid in front of me is really lucky. At this time, Zhou Jun also had a bit of astonishment on his face. His eyes rested on young A Zhuang and Lin Chengguo for a moment, and he said, "Old man, is this not appropriate?" In his opinion, there is nothing wrong with 4 people teaming up together. After all, it is a great fate to meet each other in a hidden dungeon. Moreover, they are not in a team. When the Lord Boss is defeated in the end, the experience points will be calculated according to who takes the last hit. That would be too disgraceful and could easily cause estrangement and disputes. Moreover, Zhou Jun has now reached level 21, far exceeding the level 18 target agreed with Chu Tianj. Therefore, he is not so impatient about gaining experience points. Even if 4 people form a team and share the points equally, it doesn't matter. Therefore, I was very surprised by the old man's suggestion. But Lin Chengguo shook his head and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. This world belongs to you young people. I am a bad old man, so why should I compete with you for experience points?" In fact, Lin Chengguo didn't say a word. That is, as a level 400 powerhouse, the experience provided by a level 60 dungeon lord is simply a drop in the bucket for him. Even in principle, he couldn't enter such a low-level dungeon at all. The reason why he can appear here now is entirely because of the use of god-level items. But at this moment, after Zhou Jun heard this, he stopped being pretentious. He nodded and joined the team at Lin Muyao's invitation. And as he entered the team, the level information that had always been hidden above his head also automatically appeared. When Lin Muyao, Lin Chengguo and others saw it, they were all stunned on the spot. You are only level 21. Is this true?" Lin Muyao's pink lips opened, her beautiful eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe this scene at all, and her little head was buzzing. "You know, the monster just now was as high as level 57. Doesn't this mean that the guy in front of me has killed monsters across 36 levels? Oh my god, even if the young god king is here, he can't do this, right?" Lin Muyao was shocked and speechless. They were both talented people. She was originally a little dissatisfied with Zhou Jun, but now she has no desire to win or lose at all. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.